Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. I'm your humble host, the Yamin of Revolution. You reap what you sow. Iran, Russia, and China. The New World Powers. New World Order. Before we get into that, y'all be sure to wipe y'all feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Where the DEA white supremacists are losing their mind as Iran, Russia, and China flex their military power. Let's get right to the content. Salute. U.S. running out of weapons. Iran said they just getting started.
MashaAllah, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, al-ali al-azim. هدیه به پیشگاه آقا بقیت الله العظم ارواحنا فدا. زمان بدان در رو تمام شده است. عملیات جلی که موشک نقطه‌زن خیبر با رمز یا فاطمه الزهرا یا فاطمه الزهرا یا فاطمه الزهرا شمارش معکوس 10 9 8 7 6 5 4 3 2 1
The Strait of Hormuz is once again on the edge of paralysis. Two more commercial vessels have reportedly come under attack in the strategic waterway, while the United States is warning Iran that Washington is prepared to intensify economic pressure and potentially maintain its naval blockade indefinitely. The latest escalation comes as shipping traffic through the strait has fallen dramatically. Before the war, more than 130 vessels could pass through the waterway each day, but now the numbers have collapsed. On Thursday, only 9 vessels were recorded crossing the strait, according to ship tracking data from Kepler. That was higher than the 5 crossings recorded on Wednesday, but still below the August average of around 12. The latest escalation came after 2 vessels linked to the United Arab Emirates state-owned Abu Dhabi National Oil Company were attacked while transiting the strait on Thursday evening. Separately, the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Center issued an advisory after a commercial tanker was reportedly struck by an uncrewed aerial vehicle while sailing outbound through the strait on August 13th. The vessel sustained minor damage. All crew members were reported safe, and authorities said there was no reported pollution. UKMTO urged vessels operating in the area to exercise caution and report suspicious activity. For global markets, the danger extends far beyond the ships themselves. The Strait of Hormuz connects the Persian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and is one of the world's most important energy choke points. A huge share of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments traditionally passes through this narrow waterway. With traffic now dramatically reduced, shipping companies face growing uncertainty over insurance, security, and the ability to safely reach Gulf ports. Washington is now signaling that its response may move increasingly toward economic warfare. President Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to hit Iran hard militarily, but he has so far resisted deploying American ground forces, seizing strategic Iranian islands, or taking some of the other military steps that have been discussed. Earlier this week, Trump indicated that economic pressure could play a larger role. The United States has already tightened sanctions on Iran and targeted individuals and entities accused of helping Tehran procure weapons. Iran, meanwhile, has shown no sign of simply accepting Washington's terms. A senior Iranian source said there had been no progress in talks aimed at building on a June agreement to end the war. And as the ceasefire has broken down, Iran has resumed targeting ships it accuses of attempting to cross the strait without Tehran's permission. That creates a dangerous cycle. The United States tightens the pressure, Iran restricts shipping, commercial operators stay away, energy markets feel the shock, and Washington faces pressure to decide whether economic measures are enough or whether military escalation becomes unavoidable. For now, the Strait of Hormuz is still technically open, but the numbers tell a much darker story. More than 130 vessels a day once moved through this vital passage. Now, only a fraction are willing or able to make the journey. 2 more ships have been attacked. A tanker has reportedly been hit by a drone. Washington says its economic pressure can continue indefinitely, and Tehran is making clear that it will not simply surrender control over the waterway. The question now is not just whether Hormuz will reopen, it is how long the global economy can absorb a strait operating at a fraction of its normal capacity. With every new attack, the risks rise, and with every ship that stays away, the world's most critical energy choke point moves another step toward paralysis.
Trump is being frozen out of deals by world leaders. You have Xi Jinping of China just putting the dagger into Donald Trump. Remember when Donald Trump said he was making a big, powerful deal with China? regarding China purchasing Boeing airplanes? Well, that's falling apart. Trump's Boeing deal hits turbulence as Beijing says they just can't do a deal with Donald Trump. Remember when Donald Trump said, well, when I met with Xi Jinping back in May, we talked very powerfully, very strongly about the US and China setting up a board of investment. We're going to do a board of investment together where we're going to coordinate all of this incredible trade. Well, according to some of the latest reporting out of China, the US-China Board of Investment stalls before it even really took off the ground. The president of the US-China Business Council says neither side has even initiated the consultation process under the so-called Board of Investment. Donald Trump likes making these splashy announcements, huh? The Board of Peace. He says, we've done a deal between Hamas and Israel. And then Netanyahu says, no way, we're never doing a deal with Hamas. In fact, we're going to continue the genocide and we're going to go deeper into Lebanon and Syria's the next Gaza, the Netanyahu regime says. But hey, we did call it the Board of Peace. And all Donald Trump says is, look at all the peace deals I made. And then you have Donald Trump's Undersecretary of Defense, the number 2 to Pete Hegseth over at the Defense Department. Remember, he referred to himself as a China hawk. We're going to decouple from China. We're going to show China who the real superpower is. Well, this Pentagon policy chief, Elbridge Colby, can't even get invited to Beijing. Pentagon policy chief Elbridge Colby, a longtime China hawk, meaning he's going to be tough. Just like when these MAGA Republicans say we're fiscal hawks, but then our debt rises to $40 trillion. We're deficit hawks. But then last month, we had the greatest expansion of our deficit in U.S. history. We're now paying close to what, like $1.2, $1.3 trillion of interest on the debt as our treasury bonds yields are so high at this point because Trump has caused the United States to be deemed so unpredictable and unreliable internationally. But I digress. Elbridge Colby, the China hawk, wants to play nice with an official visit to Beijing. The Chinese government is making clear he's not invited. Colby has been trying for months to get an invitation from China. He really wants just to be there and beg to improve the relationship. And they're like, nah, you're the guy talking about decoupling and screwing us over. So yeah, we're going to pass on that. So just to recap how I started this video, Donald Trump's Boeing deal off. Donald Trump's top Defense Department official won't get invited to China. Donald Trump's Board of Investment with China. No consultations took place, but I'll tell you what is happening. Taiwan is preparing for a potential invasion by China. Taiwan is now doing its largest military drills of the year, preparing for potential combat scenarios for a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Taiwan's drills are also testing relocating its arms productions in the event of a Chinese attack. Taiwan is turning its Coast Guard into a stronger military support force to counter a potential Chinese invasion or blockade. Well done, Donald. And then, I'm being sarcastic, as the United States has not only destroyed its security umbrella in the Middle East, you now know you have Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Turkey forming the Mecca Pact. Egypt may join in the future. You have other Arab nations looking to take control of their own security destiny because the U.S. has run out of weapons. Yeah, Donald Trump had $1 trillion budget last year, and he and Pete Hegseth, they bankrupted our military and they ran out of weapons. And the security umbrella by the United States has collapsed in Asia as well. And the United States security umbrella has collapsed throughout the world. The United States security umbrella has collapsed in the United States. In just a little bit, I'm going to show you what a top military general said in the United States. A top general in charge of protecting the U.S. gave a very frank and troubling assessment of the U.S. capability. I'll just play this clip now for you. I won't tease it, but I then want to show you more of what this guy had to say regarding the global alliances that are taking shape. The deputy commander of the United States Northern Command was asked this Thursday if he could defend against an attack by a swarm of drones in the homeland. His reply was blunt and chilling. No, TWZ-10 reports. We don't have the sensors, and depending on where that swarm is going to attack, it depends on whether we have sensors at all, and also on whether we've got any effectors to go after that a problem, Army Lieutenant General Joseph Girard said, who also serves as the Vice Commander, United States Element, North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD. He was addressing an audience at the Space and Missile Defense Symposium. In other words, not only does the U.S. security umbrella not work for our allies abroad, we can't defend our homeland. So let's just say we invaded Cuba, which the Trump regime is threatening to do, and then Cuba launches drones at the United States. We have zero ability to protect against that. Or as Donald Trump continues to escalate the catastrophic war in Iran, let's just say there was a ability to strike here in the U.S. We don't have any capabilities, and that's, of course, in addition to what we've been reporting here on the Midas Touch Network, how the United States just ran.
If they keep fighting Iran, maybe within 2 to 3 more months, Iran will have the intercontinental ballistic missiles system. They're working on that right now. They will be able to hit the U.S. from Iran. That's not going to be no problem. They will be able to hit the U.S. from Iran. So all those military bases they done destroyed in the Middle East, they're going to be destroying those bases in the U.S. real soon. Mark my word.
War games and various simulations with the Ukrainian military regarding how Ukrainian drone swarms would attack, how our military would deal with Ukrainian drone swarms. The Ukrainian military destroyed our military yet again in minutes with their drone swarms. And we had to, quote, respawn our military, which you can do in a video game simulation, but not in real life, multiple times, and Ukraine continued to win. Here is what this top military commander had to say, just so you can hear for yourself that we can protect our homeland from drones. Let's play this clip.
And you addressed it quite well, the threat of inexpensive drones, which are proliferating the threat space. The next threat to the homeland can be a swarm of inexpensive drones launched from inside our own borders, rather than a missile approaching from thousands of miles away. Does NORAD have the sensor coverage, authorities, and decision speed necessary to respond? And
no.
And could you comment on that and on the gap today, the biggest gap you see?
Well, I mean, we don't have the sensors, and we're not, depending on where that swarm is going to attack, depends on whether we have any sensors at all. And so,
if you keep playing with Cuba, it's going to be coming from Cuba. They will not take over Cuba. Cuba is guerrilla fighters. Those drone swarms going to be coming from Cuba real motherfucking soon if they keep playing with Cuba.
And also whether we've got any effectors to get after that problem. So we are ill-equipped right now to handle something like that. And obviously that is, we've seen it used. We're seeing it used on a daily basis around the world, and we've got to figure out how to mitigate that threat, but we're not there yet.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So while you have the Trump incapable of making deals, obviously can't make a deal with Iran, can't make a deal with China, let's take a look at people who are making deals. Foreign Minister of Iran and Pakistan held a phone conversation this week. Pakistan's foreign minister again was talking to Foreign Minister Aragchi. They discussed bilateral relations. And then what happened shortly thereafter, you had Pakistan's Prime Minister Sharif saying the following about China. I consider it extremely important to mention the everlasting friendship and sincere cooperation of our great friend China and its president, Mr. Xi Jinping. The friendship between China and Pakistan is higher than the Himalayas. The great friendly country has stood like a rock with Pakistan in every hour of trial. A defense agreement was reached with the brotherly Islamic country of Saudi Arabia last year, and now Turkey has also become part of the trilateral defense agreement reached in Mecca. Pakistan's Prime Minister Sharif said, "This is good news for peace in the Middle East. Glad tidings of peace for the Islamic world and a message of peace for the entire world." Now, there's a reason why he's talking about China and talking about the Mecca Pact in the same breath, because China is essentially now providing the security umbrella to the Mecca Pact and to the Middle East that the United States was once supposed to provide for the Middle East. US out, China in, while Donald Trump flails like the weak, pathetic loser that he is, while Taiwan prepares for war, while the US leaves Asia in a very, very weak position as the US security umbrella crashes, and as China continues to make aggressive moves in the area as well, projecting its strength in the area. You have Putin visiting Iturup, one of the Kuril Islands claimed by Japan for the first time ever, visiting a local fish processing plant after overseeing Russian Pacific Fleet drills in the Far East. Tokyo strongly protested this visit by Putin, reiterating its claim to the island, Reuters reports, but the Trump regime too utterly pathetic to do anything about it. That's why Putin is showing what he's doing in the Japanese region. You had, by the way, ballistic missile tests from North Korea in the past 48 hours, coming pretty close to Japan, as Kim Jong-un talks about how North Korea will always be a nuclear power. You've got, again, Russia there, you got China there, you got North Korea there. And so what's the Trump regime doing? Well, you had Brad Cooper, the head of CENTCOM. He showed up recently in Israel, and then Israel's Channel 13 reported that CENTCOM Commander Brad Cooper is pushing for renewed U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran, including oil, gas, and electricity infrastructure. He reportedly told senior IDF officials that such attacks could force Iran to change its position. I mean, are these people the dumbest, stupidest people ever? I mean, CENTCOM in the United States is literally being run by a Trumpian clown. This Brad Cooper guy is an absolute fool. I saw him testify. His behavior has been so unbecoming. And I think as a patriotic American, you have to call out these idiots and go, who the hell is this guy? This guy is not smart. He is awful. And he shows up in Israel and then he says that. And so Israel says, here's what Brad Cooper told us. And then Brad Cooper's like, no, I didn't say that. We're not actually going to do that. U.S. CENTCOM then denies Israeli media reports, claiming its commander, Admiral Brad Cooper, is pushing for a strike on Iran, calling the reports false. Well, you showed up in Israel. You met with their top leadership after you know that they fabricated the evidence saying that Iran was going to blow up the old Air Force One. And that caused Donald Trump to cower in a food truck, because he was terrified that he was going to get killed by Iran. Iran's not going to kill the guy. Iran knows that Trump is killing America. Okay, so let's be clear what's actually happening there. So you show up in Israel, you show up with Netanyahu, and then you're shocked that Netanyahu said that that's what you're planning on doing. You again let yourself be used as a puppet, and then you can't make this stuff up. You've got Pete Hegseth now saying America's strategy in Iran is a never-ending war. This is what Hegseth says. U.S. can keep the naval blockade on Iranian ports indefinitely. Hegseth says, yes, we could do this forever. We never have to leave. The hell are you talking about? Then you have Treasury Secretary Bessent saying Washington will announce new measures next week, combining intensified financial pressure with an open-ended naval blockade aimed at further isolating Iran. What do you mean further isolating Iran? Iran has great relationships with the BRICS. It is very close, again, with China and with Russia and North Korea as well. But okay, go live in your fantasy world that this is the right strategy. It's so utterly pathetic. Meanwhile, you have the Houthis allied with Iran, continuing their offensive in the Al-Makah region. It does indeed seem like the Ansar Allah, that's the Houthis, are making a push toward Mocha on Yemen's west coast. Reports are speaking of several points recently captured. And as lots of people are observing, like this open source intelligence account. It does seem like Ansar Allah, the Houthis, are trying to expand their control of the Red Sea coast and Bab el-Mandab. They already control a lot of Western Yemen, but they are trying to control Al-Maka, one of the remaining areas that the Saudi-backed government controls. Should also be noted, Iran released additional satellite imagery from the result of the missile drone strikes that were carried out last month, where they struck hard in the UAE and Bahrain and American bases there. The UAE just announced that ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, had 2 more tankers hit in the Strait of Hormuz in the past 48 hours. And you have the U.S. flailing while you have these deals being made throughout the world right now. Also, the U.S. tariffs against Canada are set to now take place very soon. We'll see what happens there. The U.S. continues to attack its allies. But let's go back and let's listen right now for a moment to what Lieutenant General Joseph Girard has to say about China, North Korea, Iran, these other alliances that are being formed. Here, play this clip.
Since 2022, China has launched 8 Shang-3 class nuclear-powered guided missile submarines and likely will have all 8 operational by 2027, providing the Chinese with a clandestine land attack option against critical infrastructure in Alaska and along the West Coast. Meanwhile, adversaries are developing and fielding advanced nuclear and conventional delivery capabilities, cruise, hypersonic, and ballistic missiles, as well as fractional orbital bombardment systems, or FOBs, to threaten not only Alaska and Hawaii, but the entire continental United States. The Chinese are developing ICBMs equipped with hypersonic glide vehicles, as well as FOBs weapons that can approach North America from the south rather than the traditional northerly vector for which our legacy early warning radars were designed. Such systems would erode strategic stability by degrading our ability to provide granular and actionable warning of an inbound attack. The Chinese have also begun fielding a conventional armed ICBM equipped with hypersonic glide vehicles that can range targets throughout Alaska, providing Chinese leaders strike options against our homeland below the nuclear threshold. Russia's advanced missiles, like the nuclear-armed Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle, are designed to circumvent the ground-based radars used by NORAD and NORTHCOM to detect and characterize an inbound threat and challenge the ability to provide threat warning and attack assessment. And finally, the North Koreans have successfully flight-tested ICBMs with enough boost to deliver a nuclear payload anywhere in North America, and in October of 24 unveiled a new ICBM design that may be designated to carry multiple nuclear-armed reentry vehicles. In the era of strategic competition, we recognize that geography no longer provides the protection and standoff range of the past, and a more robust approach is needed to defend the United States and Canada. This is visible in the cyber domain, where thousands of attempts are made daily to breach our networks, originating from known state actors and an ever-growing hard-to-detect and defeat network of non-state actors. Foreign terrorist organizations are fueling violence and destabilization, proliferating human trafficking, drug trafficking, and driving migration in the United States and her allies. The threats to North America are real and persistent, and they radiate from every point of the compass.
And again, that's coming from one of our top generals right there, who also says we can't protect our homeland. Think about that. Think about it. You heard him for yourself. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million. Pre-order WTF America now. Have you pre-ordered WTF?
before the moon, let's talk about the Chinese launch, sub-launch ballistic missile into the Pacific Ocean. Now, there's a big ruckus being raised by United States and all the U.S. vassal states in the South Pacific. I'm talking about the Anglo Five Eye members like Australia and New Zealand. They're like, oh my God, China just fired a nuclear-capable missile into the nuclear-free zone of South Pacific.
The Australian Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, made it clear that the warning of this test was extremely short, so they were surprised. Do you accept what she says, that a test of this nature with very limited warning is destabilizing for the region?
No, not at all. I think China follows international protocol, notifying countries of concern for this testing. And I think Australia should be grateful that China give Australia the courtesy of advance notice about the testing, about the flight details, etc. And I hope China and Australia will really get along with each other, not only as two very large economic trading partners, but also more and more sharing and coordinating on political matters or even geopolitical matters.
The leaders of the Pacific nations made clear that they objected to China testing missile of this nature in the Pacific.
Well, in the world of today, in terms of pragmaticality, you may object, but then you need to follow the international rules. The Pacific is not a prohibited region for nuclear testing, and China has absolute legitimacy in doing this kind of testing in the Pacific without violating any international protocol.
These don't sound like terribly peaceful words, but let me just ask you one question. Does Australia's increasing interoperability, that is working alongside with enabling US forces in Australia, make Australia a target for the Chinese military?
Well, at the time when AUKUS was announced, I said publicly on Australian television that Australia should really treasure the luxury of being a nuclear-free country. So my point is very simple. Treasure the nuclear-free zone, free country status for Australia, and make sure that Australia will not be involved in any nuclear confrontation. And a nuclear-powered submarine will be tantamount to be a nuclear submarine in itself, and is a major step into enriching nuclear uranium, etc., and possessing nuclear technologies to be less and less considered as a nuclear-free country. And I want to urge everyone in Australia to do the right thing. Stay away from being a nuclear power, because you do not know what will be the consequence.
Well, first of all, like what they're talking about, the nuclear-free zone, is they're talking about a Treaty of Rarotonga that says no nuclear testing in this area. Well, guess what? China did not fire a nuke into that area. I mean, like the Treaty of Rarotonga said nothing about ballistic missile testing. It says no nuclear testing. China fired a dummy warhead into that area. And the fact that, you know, I can tell you the number of times China had launched ballistic missiles in South Pacific from time immemorial, from the beginning of the human history until now. China has fired three missiles into that area. The first one was ICBM back in the early 1980s. The last one was in 2024, and now this last recent one. Guess how many times the United States have fired missiles in that area? Hundreds. The United States conducting hundreds of ICBM and sub-launch ballistic missiles in that area. Never a peep of complaint from Australia and New Zealand. Now, China conducted third test, and suddenly everybody's up in arms, like, oh my God, this is raising the tension. China is firing a nuclear-capable missile into a nuclear-free zone. It's like, look, man, and I'll tell you why China did that. This also happened to align with, U.S. maneuver to contain China. I had a debate with Scott Ritter on this back in the days. For some reason, yes. So at that time, it was me, Scott Ritter, and Alex Reporterfy. we're talking about like Chinese capabilities. Like Alex was saying, oh, look at Chongqing where I live now. Like the factories are humming. China can pump up stuff like nothing. And Scott says, you know what? We, United States, we could bomb those factories. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Do you even know where Chongqing is? Chongqing is not even located on the coast. It's located on the inland China. I don't think U.S. have any capability of sending a B-2 or a bomber deep inside China to drop a load. I mean, I think that's a fantasy. But Scott Ritter's like, well, what about we have? But guess what? We have those quiet subs lay on the bottom of South China Sea. What if we do the first launch? What if we strike first, right? Well, guess what? What China has demonstrated is that China has second strike capability. This launch was from a Chinese sub. Like these and China has been creating nuclear subs, like they're cranking out nuclear sub like dumplings in more recent years. I think this year they just made two new additional ones, and so these subs will be able to roam quietly all across the ocean, loaded with nuclear capable missiles, and that they can fire over long distance. So what that means, even if U.S. does a preemptive strike, even a nuclear strike against targets in China, China is telling United States, hey, we possess second strike capability. Your ass will be nuked. Okay, if you're gonna bring war to China's footsteps, your ass can be nuked. And this is why there's a widespread panic. Right? I mean, like before, they think United States will be able to bomb and nuke China with impunity. This is why there's even a talk about a limited nuclear war, like using tactical nuclear missiles against U.S. against Chinese naval bases on the islands and in the surrounding. So China's like, hold your horses. Look, Mad Doctrine is still in effect. Right? If you dare attack us, we will nuke you. Don't worry about it. Right? So this is a reminder for people, and because what China has tested is not even a new capability. This is they have possession of that missile for over 10 years. This is just a test. This is a demonstration of capability. Look, we do have the capability of second strike. And we can nuke you. That is a message China was trying to send. So, and of course, that's ruffled a lot of feathers in Washington and beyond.
Well, look, I would tell you this. Ritter is a cheerleader. He's not. If we are talking about specific things about the nuclear doctrine and stuff like that, fair enough. But the Ukraine war is not over. The U.S. cannot just randomly bomb an area that he didn't know, where it even was. And this idea that they can do tactical nukes and that will be the end of it is nonsense. A tactical nuclear war is a nuclear war, and it would escalate to a nuclear war improper. Like, it's just outrageous that the argument would even be made. Every military test that we've done where we attacked China, we lost. We lost. How are those ships even going to get close to the coast? Like, meaning it immediately escalates into a nuclear war. A conventional war is just, that's amazing to me that he was making that. I mean, well, maybe it's not amazing to me that Ritter would make that case. That's just astonishing. I would say that a country the size of China obviously has second strike capability. He didn't believe that.
Well, I mean, at that time, he said, yeah, what if the U.S. strike first? All these quiet U.S. subs from South China Sea could launch those missiles toward target in China. Well, China just showed, well, okay, we could do the same. Like what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You can launch from your subs. We can launch from our subs. We will be officially in the Fallout territory. I'm an old gamer. I love Fallout series, and I remember one of the side plot of the Fallout 2 game was a Chinese nuclear submarine after they fired their missiles, got stranded in San Francisco in the a nuclear apocalypse America and then colonize San Francisco. So we are right on that timeline right now, Jamar. We're very close on the timeline.
This missile that it fired into the sea, like you said, this was testing old capability. This was more of a signal more than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine China already knew the missile worked. Or did they know the missile worked?
Well, I mean, I'm sure they know the missile worked. I mean, like that. That's why they would fire it toward international water, right? Because like otherwise they probably could just like fire. I don't know, somehow. And that's another thing, like for China to test its long range, ICBMs and stuff. Where else would China fire? Like Russia could potentially, do it within territory because Russia is really big. But China, as big as China is, China is about the size of United States. And if they're going to test an ICBM or something like that, you will have to go to international waters. Just no place else. Yeah.
Well, obviously, the United States, Australia, New Zealand don't have room to complain and bitch about this. And this is not about fairness, it's about power. Basically, we don't want China demonstrating methods of strength. That's up to us to do, right? Yeah. But we want to do that. We don't want them to do that. It's like the lady protests far too much. The lady protests far too much. And to be honest, China doesn't care that they're complaining, right? Or do they?
I mean, I think it's expected. I think China expected the pushback. Speaking of lady protesting too much, well, may Lindsey Graham rest in peace.
Yes, may Lindsey Graham rest in peace.
Pieces, pieces.
Basically, rest in hell.
Rest in pieces. Yes.
Joking. We have been saying some bad things about Miss Lindsay since his death. What's funny, we've had all sorts of rumors. One rumor that I created was that when he went to Ukraine, he saw those sexy Ukrainian men, those sexy Nazis, with their tight buttocks and those military garb, and his heart just couldn't take it. His ticker just. Oh my God.
Well, I actually the last public release news about Lindsey Graham before the announcement of his death, that he visited a Ukrainian drone factory, the Skyfall drone factory. And that factory was later bombed by Russian missiles. We know that drone factory was destroyed. And now we have the news that Lindsey Graham is somehow died of sudden illness. I mean, what is the possibility? What is the possibility that that Lindsey Graham suddenly succumbed to a sudden illness called the Russian Iskander missiles up his ass? I mean, what is that? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know.
Oh, that is funny. He died from a sudden illness called the Russian missile strike. That's a new illness. I float between those two theories. He was in Ukraine and his heart couldn't take the sexy Nazis in their uniforms, or he got taken out by a Russian missile and they just call it a cardiac event. I bet he did have a cardiac event as the missile hit, right?
Yeah, so no, I'm sure.
I feel you. It's like, oh my God, the Russians. Miss Lindsay died of a sassy senator from South Carolina died of a missile, Yeah, it's pretty wild. I'm glad you brought that up because we have been riffing on that.
I'm sure his family and his children will miss it. Oh wait. Yeah, doesn't have children. Anyways.
You know what's wild though? Before we move on to the moon thing, Ted brought up, he was like, who made the phone call? Who made the call? Like, meaning when the cops got to the house door was locked. Who made the call to let them know that Miss Lindsay was having a cardiac event? Oh, ain't that interesting? Ain't that interesting? It's possible that Lindsay was engaged in, let's say, activities unbefitting of a U.S. senator. But that's not true. Lindsey Graham can do whatever he wants. Look, by the way, I'm joking not because he's gay. I'm joking because He's a Republican. They can't acknowledge that he's gay.
You saw that viral clip when I forgot which journalist said, "Can you just come out of the closet so people can't blackmail you for being gay?"
He couldn't do it. That's the sad part. He couldn't. He didn't think he could do it as a Republican. Which is sad, right? It's like you live your whole life in the closet, and everybody knows, but nobody says. And yet,
now we have like openly gay Republican oligarchs like Peter Thiel now, backing Trump. It's like, come on, Lindsay, it's 2026. It's okay. Let it go. Just so people can't blackmail you anymore. Just let it out in the open. It's okay. You can be an evil gay Republican. It's okay.
It's okay. Like, look, and again, I want to be very clear. We're not mocking him because he's gay. We're mocking him because he doesn't admit that he's gay.
Well, because and he's evil. And he's evil. I mean, let's yeah.
He's an evil human being.
Yeah.
So there.
He's not evil because he's gay. He's gay, but he's evil. That's the difference, right? So we're mocking him because he's evil and he denied the fact he's gay.
Yes, it's a little bit of both, right? Yeah, the evil thing more so, but the fact that he just can't acknowledge that homosexuality is just wild to me. After 20-something, 30 years in Congress, or however long he was in Congress. No, it's sad. It's sad that he didn't feel like he could come out the closet. And like I said, there's a question of who called the cops, because when the cops got there, the door was locked. So was Lindsay having a tryst? The tryst went bad. He couldn't take it. Heart gave up. The guy says, "Holy shit, I have a dead senator. What do I do? Let me call the cops and let me get out of here." Oh, so many questions. So many questions. I'm glad you brought that up, Carl. I needed to laugh this morning.
Instead of China behaving like the Soviet Union, it is the United States that's behaving like the Soviet Union. If the United States was serious about taking on China, it should cut its defense budget into half, but that's impossible. And in that, it's like the old Soviet Union that also couldn't cut its defense budget. And the Chinese are very happy that America has 13 aircraft carrier fleets. An aircraft carrier today is a sitting duck.
Mm-hmm. What if China has discovered America's biggest military weakness and it has nothing to do with having a stronger army? But don't get me wrong, the United States still has the world's most powerful military. It spends more on defense than any other country, operates the most advanced aircraft carriers on Earth, and possesses some of the most sophisticated weapons ever created. But China is not trying to defeat America by copying its military. Instead, Beijing is playing a different game. Rather than building bigger and more expensive weapons, China has focused on cheaper, faster, and more scalable technology designed to challenge America's greatest advantages. And this raises a question that could shape the future of global power. Is America spending too much preparing for the wars of the past while China is preparing for the wars of the future? To understand this strategy, listen to what Singaporean diplomat and strategist Professor Kishore Mahbubani has to say about America's biggest challenge.
The reason why I encourage Americans to think deeper is that if they look very carefully at the track record of what China is doing and what the Soviet Union is doing, right? It is actually quite shocking that in the geopolitical contest today between China and United States, instead of China behaving like the Soviet Union, it is the United States that's behaving like the Soviet Union. Because I explain in the book in one chapter, I ask, can America make U-turns? So, for example, the contest between United States and China will not take place in the military sphere. It will be in a nuclear war between the United States and China. There will not be a winner and a loser. There will be a loser and loser. So logically, it should be in the interest of the United States, therefore, to reduce its defense budget and take the money and invest in R&D, because that's where the real contest is. But the United States cannot reduce its defense budget, because no matter how brilliant a defense secretary you have, whether it's Ash Carter or General Mattis, because the process of deciding where to spend money is locked in by the US Congress, and allocations are made to each constituency by the congressman. And therefore, the defense budget is large, irrational, and unnecessary. And if the United States was serious about taking on China, it should cut its defense budget into half, but that's impossible. And in that, so it's like the old Soviet Union that also couldn't cut its defense budget into half.
Strangled itself.
Yeah. So in that sense, the United States hasn't thought very hard and very deep about how different this contest with China is. Whereas by contrast, the Chinese are quite happy. They're growing their defense budget, but at a fixed percentage of their GNP and not increasing it. And the Chinese are very happy that America has 13 aircraft carrier fleets, because each aircraft carrier fleet is draining millions of dollars away from the US Treasury every day. And paradoxically, in military terms, an aircraft carrier today is a sitting duck. And as an American professor, Tim Colton of Harvard told me, it just takes $100,000 hypersonic missile to bring down a $1 billion aircraft carrier. So it doesn't make sense anymore. So clearly you need to have a fundamental strategic reboot in American thinking. And in that sense, I'm trying to be helpful to America, say, think very hard about what are the big changes you need to make.
The point Professor Mahbubani makes is not that America is weak. In fact, America remains the world's most powerful military. The issue is whether America's enormous defense spending is being used in the most effective way. Because in the competition with China, the battlefield of the future may not be dominated by the country with the biggest weapons. It may be dominated by the country that can innovate faster, manufacture more, and produce advanced technology at lower costs. And this is where America faces a difficult problem, a problem created by its own political system. The US has something that many countries do not have, a massive military-industrial complex. This system connects the Pentagon, defense companies, factories, and politicians across the country. And there is a reason why cutting military spending is extremely difficult. You see, a fighter jet is not built in just one place. A Navy ship is not made in just one factory. The production of a single weapon system can involve thousands of suppliers spread across dozens of states. That means defense spending is not just about national security. It is also about jobs. If a politician votes to cancel a major defense project, they are not simply cutting a military program. They may be closing factories, hurting local businesses, and putting thousands of workers at risk. This creates a political problem. Even when military leaders say they need to shift resources toward new technology, Congress often has pressure to protect continue spending enormous amounts of money on traditional military systems, even as the nature of warfare changes. And history shows that great powers can sometimes struggle when they become too focused on maintaining old advantages. The Soviet Union is one good example. During the Cold War, Moscow spent massive amounts of resources competing with the United States militarily. It built thousands of tanks, nuclear weapons, and military systems. But while the Soviet Union invested heavily in military power, its economy struggled to keep pace with technological and consumer innovation. Eventually, the economic burden became one of many factors that contributed to its collapse. The lesson is not that America is becoming the Soviet Union. The United States today has far stronger economy and a more completely different political system. However, the warning is simple. A country can be powerful and still make strategic mistakes if it spends too much preparing for yesterday's challenges. The second problem is even more interesting. The future of warfare may not be about building the biggest weapons. It may be about building the cheapest weapons that can destroy the most expensive ones. This is called asymmetric warfare, and we are already seeing examples of it today. Just look at the rise of drones. A modern attack drone can be surprisingly cheap. For example, Iran's drone, which has been used extensively in recent conflicts, is estimated to cost somewhere between tens of thousands of dollars. Compare that with the weapons used to stop it. A Patriot missile interceptor can cost several $million. That creates a huge economic imbalance. Imagine someone attacks you with a $30,000 weapon. To stop it, you must spend $4 million weapon. You may win the battle, but if this happens hundreds of thousands of times, the cost starts becoming a serious problem. The question is no longer, can you stop the attack? The question then becomes, can you afford to keep stopping it? This is the new challenge modern military faces. Cheap drones, artificial intelligence, cyber weapons, and precision missiles are allowing smaller and cheaper systems to challenge traditional military power. China has been watching these changes carefully. Instead of trying to copy America's military model, China has focused on a different strategy. The goal is not necessarily to build military larger than America's. The goal is to make America's existing advantages much harder and more expensive to use. One example is aircraft carriers. The US operates 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Each carrier represents decades of engineering, thousands of personnel, and billions of dollars in investment. The newest Gerald Ford class carrier cost more than $13 billion just to build. And that does not include the cost of aircraft, escorts, maintenance, and operations. China understands that competing ship for ship with America would be extremely expensive. So instead, China has invested heavily in systems designed to challenge those ships. This includes long-range missiles, hypersonic weapons, satellites, drones, and advanced targeting systems. The idea is simple. Why spend tens of billions building your own version of America's aircraft carriers when you can develop cheaper weapons that make those carriers much harder to operate near your coastline? This is why many analysts describe China's military strategy as denial. China does not necessarily need to destroy America's entire military. It only needs to make America's most expensive assets too risky and too costly to use. But there's another side to this story. America still has major advantages. It has one of the world's largest economies, the most experienced military in the world, a global network of bases, powerful allies, and some of the best technology companies and universities. China also faces serious challenges, including an aging population, slower economic growth, regional tensions, and dependence on imported energy and advanced technology. So this is not simply a story of America losing and China winning. The real competition is about one thing: which country can adapt faster to the future, which country can innovate faster, build better technology, and prepare for the next era of global competition. Because history shows that great powers rarely decline because they suddenly become weak. They decline when they fail to adapt. The British Empire did not lose its influence because it became poor overnight. The Soviet Union did not collapse because it stopped having weapons. They declined because the world changed faster than their system could adjust. And that may be the biggest challenge facing America today. The question is not whether America has the strongest military, because America obviously does. The question is whether that military is designed for the conflict of tomorrow, or whether it is protecting the victories of yesterday. Because in the 21st century, the country that wins the great power competition may not be the one with the biggest weapons. It may be the one that can build smarter technology, manufacture faster, and create more value with every dollar it spends. And that is the new battlefield between America and China. So, what do you think? Is America's military spending still Taiwan is one of America's most important partners in Asia. But here's the strange part. The more important Taiwan becomes to America, the more dangerous its position could become. Why? Because Taiwan is sitting right in the middle of the biggest power struggle in the world between America and China. Washington wants to contain China's growing power. Beijing wants to prevent Taiwan from moving closer to America. And Taiwan is caught right in between them. So here's the big question. Can Taiwan rely on America for protection without becoming a pawn in the US-China rivalry? That's exactly what Singapore's former Foreign Minister Joshua tried to explain, and his answer is surprisingly blunt. Take a look.
The US is increasingly threatened by a rising China. China does not threaten the US militarily, but China threatens US dominance in the world. And because of this, US strategic preoccupation now is with trying to slow China down, contain China, pull down China if possible. So all of us are familiar with the chip war, which is going on, and the systematic effort done by whole departments in Washington to find ways to slow down China, to degrade China if possible. Of course, whether they succeed or not depends on how China responds. So Taiwan is caught in this larger struggle. So the question for Taiwan is this: you cannot affect US-China relations, but you can decide how much you want to be used by America against China. If you decide that you want to be used by America against China in the hope that one day there is a chance the door opens and I rush up and become independent, then understand that there is a big risk involved. But I think it is better for ordinary people who only want peaceful lives for themselves and their children to say, look, don't drag me in. This is your fight. This is your fight. So you notice that how much Taiwan Green leaders may want to push. They are limited by what the US allows them to do. So the US will not allow Taiwan to affect their game. But if you allow yourself to be used by the US, you will be used by the US when it's convenient for the US. And if it's no longer convenient for the US, Taiwan will be sacrificed, which was what happened in 1972. So I think if I were Taiwanese, I say, no. I need the US because it improves my relationship, my negotiating position with China, but do not become a plaything of the US. Then all of us, our lives are at risk.
What Joshua is saying is actually quite simple. China does not pose an existential military threat to the American homeland, but China's rise is challenging America's position as the dominant power in Asia. And that has changed the way Washington looks at China. Over the past few years, America has introduced tariffs, restricted China's access to advanced semiconductor technology, encourage companies to move important supply chains away from China, and strengthen its military partnerships across Asia. From Washington's perspective, these measures are about protecting American security and preventing China from gaining too much strategic power. But Beijing sees the same actions very differently. From China's perspective, this looks like containment. China is getting stronger, and instead of accepting the new reality, Beijing believes Washington is trying to slow China's rise and surround it with a network of alliances. And Taiwan has become one of the most important pieces in this competition. Beijing has been very clear about its position. China considers Taiwan part of China and sees the Taiwan issue as an internal Chinese matter. So when America sells weapons to Taiwan, expands military cooperation, or talks about defending the island, Beijing doesn't necessarily see that as purely defensive move. It can look like America is using Taiwan to put pressure on China, right? And this creates a dangerous cycle. Here's the interesting part. America says, we are helping Taiwan defend itself. You know what China says? China says, you're using Taiwan to contain us. America responds to China's growing military power. China, on the other hand, responds to America's growing presence. And Taiwan is caught in between. But there's another reason Taiwan has become so important. Taiwan isn't just strategically located. It is also one of the most important technology centers in the world. Companies such as TSMC produce a huge share of the world's most advanced semiconductors. These tiny chips are inside smartphones, computers, cars, data centers, and AI systems. They are also important for modern military technology. So Taiwan has become incredibly valuable to the global economy. And that makes the Taiwan question even more complicated. America wants to make sure these critical technologies don't fall under China's control. China, meanwhile, does not want Taiwan to become a permanent strategic base for the United States. So both Washington and Beijing have very strong reasons to care about what happens on the island. But here's where George Yo's warning becomes particularly interesting. Taiwan can have powerful friends, but Taiwan cannot assume those friends will always have exactly the same interests. History has already shown us this. In the early 1970s, America and China were bitter rivals. But President Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger realized that improving relations with Beijing could help America deal with the Soviet Union. So Washington changed its strategy. Nixon visited China in 1972, and by 1979, the United States had formally established diplomatic relations with Beijing. Think about how dramatic that change was. The US had once viewed Communist China as a major enemy. Then geopolitical circumstances changed, and cooperation suddenly became useful. The lesson isn't that America cannot be trusted. The lesson is that great powers follow their national interests, and those interests can change. That's something Taiwan has to understand. America's support is obviously valuable. It gives Taiwan greater military deterrence and makes any attack much more costly. But there's a difference between having America's support and becoming a frontline player in America's rivalry with China. And that distinction could become extremely important because Taiwan cannot control what Washington does. And it also cannot control what Beijing does as well. But it can decide how far it wants to be pulled into their competition. And this is where the Chinese perspective is often missing from the discussion. From Beijing's point of view, China is watching a territory it considers part of its own country becoming increasingly connected to America's military and political system. Now imagine how Washington would react if China began building a major military partnership with a territory right next to the US. Americans would probably see that as a serious security threat, right? China sees the Taiwan situation in a similar way. That doesn't mean Beijing's position has to be accepted. But if we want to understand why China reacts so strongly, we have to understand the logic behind it. And there's an even bigger problem. If the US-China rivalry continues getting worse, Taiwan could become the place where the two sides eventually collide. And if that happens, Taiwan will pay the highest price. Not Washington, not Beijing, Taiwan. Its cities, businesses, infrastructure, and people would be directly affected. And because Taiwan is so important to the semiconductor industry, a conflict could also send shockwaves through the entire global economy. So perhaps the question isn't simply, should Taiwan choose America or China? Maybe the more important question is, how can Taiwan remain secure without becoming a battlefield in the US-China rivalry? Taiwan needs strong defenses. It needs international partners, and it needs to protect its own interests. But it also needs to understand something very, very important. China isn't going anywhere, right? America isn't going anywhere either. And Taiwan has to find a way to survive between these two powers. Because when two giants compete for control of the future, the smaller player has to be very careful about becoming the weapon of either side. So, what do you think? Is America's growing support actually making Taiwan safer? Or is it increasing the risk of a confrontation with China? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications for more. Thank you for watching.
Second. And just to highlight this to you. So what happened regarding this, and I'm not going to say the name of this channel that disclosed this information, because I want and put a comment responding to them, because that wasn't right what they did. And what I wrote is this: please refrain from spreading unverified info and do not mislead the viewers, because it's the right thing to do. So here is what happened. This headline regarding the Chinese 14 naval assets has blocked the entry of the U.S. aircraft carrier into the South China Sea. What happened is was repackaged and it was sensationalized. Why? For this channel, YouTube, whatever. So because the central theme of this doesn't hold up. And I'm going to share the details with you. And as a matter of fact, I looked in another source that fact-checked the same clip that was played in this particular YouTube, who claimed that 14 PLAN warship blocked the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group. Let me put the picture for you here so you know what I'm talking about. This is the Carl Vinson Strike Groups. When they say strike groups, he moves with the fighter jets and he moves with the AWACS. This is the recon. It's an entire picture of this. Okay, that's what they said. And it says that's from entering the South China Sea with the carrier holding possessions while Washington is debating a response. But there was a problem with this. And the real problem is this. In Maryland, in Annapolis, Maryland, there is the U.S. Navy Institute, okay? And with that, released an information, and I verified it, that, first of all, Carl Vinson Carrier Group was not there. Carl Vinson Carrier Group, the one you see on the picture here, was in San Diego. That's one. Second, I tracked these ships myself, looking at them. This is the big picture. This one on the United States, and I have the one right here in that part of the world, South China Sea. It's an interactive map, so I can't play it through here. I have to log in into a system for me to play it. I just want to show you the picture of it. And this is not your average sort of a tracker per se. And why is this important? Because when I verified, Carl Vinson was back in San Diego. So where the problem was, it was a U.S. naval assets entered the South China Sea. That was the USS George Washington, not Carl Vinson. I have a picture of the George Washington. I believe I do. Oh, where is the picture? I guess I didn't upload it. Sorry, I uploaded the other ones, but anyway, I didn't upload that one. But that's what it was. So there was, and by the way, this is not coming just from the US side. It's coming also from the Chinese Defense Ministry, which I checked. It was no statements released by the Ministry of Defense of China, because something like this, they will release something about it. It's too big to just ignore. There is no way. So the Chinese Coast Guard, the Ministry of Defense, the Xinhua linked source linked to the Chinese government, all of them, there was no announcements. It was nothing discussed about blockade of a U.S. carrier with 14 warships. And if this is not enough, I'm going to add one more. And that thing that I'm going to add is geography. The South China Sea in itself, and I'm going to put the map for you right there. See that South China Sea? That spans about 3.5 million square kilometers, which means what? 14 ships couldn't meaningfully blockade the whole sea. That's one other issue with that. And mostly, they could contest one specific track, while a carrier group has room to reroute or alter its approach if it wanted to access this. And by the way, this map you're looking at, the Americans have not done justice to the Chinese regarding the disclosure of the boundaries of the South China Sea vis-a-vis China. We did this for Europe, but we're not doing it for the Chinese. So it's kind of, you can see why that is the case. So I just wanted to put this out first, because the facts remain. Because this, when you think about it, there should be no confusion as to which ship are we talking about here. So those sensational videos, and I urge you to be careful as to what you are listening or watching for. And if you want to watch that kind of stuff, make sure you send them a comment and let them know to refrain from disclosing the unverified information. So this reporting about Carl Vinson, which didn't exist to begin with, it's the ambiguous about the George Washington, which was never blocked, by the way, from entering South China Sea. I have it on a good authority that is entered. China wasn't interested in blocking that. There is no need for that. Because the George Washington, USS George Washington, did transit the Luzon Strait. It's right here. This is the strait. Okay? It did. That's a fact. Yeah. And it entered on July 22nd. That was back then. It was escorted by 3 other ships. It was escorted by, first one is USS Robert Smalls. And I have the pictures of all those ships right here. Here is the one. That's the first one. The second escort was the USS Benfold. Here is that one. And the third one was the USS Shoup. Here's that one. So they all entered. It was the Chinese didn't block anything. They just, as long as they don't get closer within 12 nautical miles, China doesn't have a problem with that. Of course, Chinese are aware of the movements over there. So I'm going to share with you the link of where the passage of this, and we'll just continue in my own analysis, because I have another angle to all this, which is something you don't want to miss. So, and by the way, just to let you know, when a movement of an aircraft carrier group goes whatever, the first thing you're gonna have to ask yourself, in this case, where were the planes, the aircraft carriers? Because any area group will have to have planes with it. And that is the purpose of this, because the planes or the fighter jets will have flagged a 14 ship blocking action if one has happened. So, and once again, the U.S. Navy Institute reports that it was George Washington, not the Carl Vinson. Okay, so I just want to put this to rest once for all. Okay, that didn't happen. But here is where you have to understand the framing of something. I don't even know what prompts somebody like this to go and lie to the viewers about. Shame on this person if he or she is listening to this. But suffice it to say that the framing on George Washington, USS George Washington, of course, there was an opportunity for some analysts inside the Pentagon here, because this is how they framed it. They flipped the scenario. Here is what they're saying. They're saying we should think about it isn't about can China stop the carrier from entering. No. They are asking, or they are framing it, can the carrier stop China Coast Guards? Since Beijing pressures on the Philippines runs through the gray zone Coast Guard tactics at Scarborough and the second Thomas Shoal. Okay? You know, the point of this is to flip the narrative, just in case this happened, which you and I know has nothing to do with the facts. And I'm going to break down all this for you. So one thing, the conclusion you need to get is that this 14 PL, the People's Liberation Army Navy warship blocks a carrier, it traces to some unverified clips in YouTube. So, but it was verified. So we'll close the case on this. Now, here is where you have to think about this. First, is that the Chinese conducted a military drill, sea drills that is, around the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea. And why is this important to understand? Because you remember the incident with the Philippines. But this presented the Philippines with two options, only two. Either to back down or to get involved in a completely unequal confrontation. The first option, in my opinion, looking from outside in, is a wiser response to the maneuvers that took place. By the way, when did they happen? The media didn't cover, and I confirmed it on August 1st. And that in itself was followed by a strict military measures that will make Philippines remember its true size in the face of the dragon. Let's just that sink in. And why am I saying this? It's because I want to pave the way for a different scenario altogether. And that scenario is this, in a form of question. Let's assume the incident took place. The 14 PLAN blocks a U.S. aircraft carrier group from entering. How significant will this be? It's legitimate questions. As I said, I devoted a long section in the book about Chinese naval assets and what it means. And I did run some scenarios in the book. So you'll get a chance to read it once it's released. So here's the thing. If a PLN, the People's Liberation Army Navy formation, actually succeeded in barring a U.S. carrier group from entering the South China Sea, it would be one of the most consequential naval events since three main things. A, this is like the third Taiwan Strait crisis, arguably more significant than anything else. B, because it involves deterrence through presence of the Chinese naval assets. No, that's one. This is Chinese naval assets right there. Okay, that's one. And C, it will not be just a physical denial of a transit. So, because the carrier group's freedom movements is a tangible expression of US military primacy. So if China blocks this, that means that primacy doesn't exist anymore. Okay? Which means what? That means China will compel a reroute or a standoff through a massed presence rather than, let's say, some shot fire. It will demonstrate that Beijing has indeed crossed from what we call contesting the South China Sea to actually controlling access to it. And that is the gray line we always talk about, between the gray line friction, because what it means that this is a genuine shift in the regional balance of power, and will automatically compel now allies like the Philippines. I don't call them allies. Those are subservient states. They just call them what they are. And I don't shy away from that. So you have Philippines, you have Japan, and you have Australia, South Korea to a degree, but not in this case here. Because those countries, as of now, will have to recalculate whether the US security umbrella is credible when it matters. And yet, you and I know it doesn't. Ask Ukraine. Okay? And if we are to go with this scenario, the knock-on effect of this will be very fast and severe. Because when you think about the, what's the word I'm looking for? The alliance, those alliances, the South Korea, the Japan, the Philippines, the Australia. When you think about this alliance structure, because especially in Manila and Philippines, since she is dealing with the Chinese regarding that parts of the South China Sea, which I still do not get as to why on earth the Philippines will not follow the same path Vietnam did when they bilaterally negotiated the dispute and resolved it. And look where Vietnam is today economically. Ask anybody who visited Hanoi or Saigon, see the economic development. So why the heck Philippines is not doing that? But again, it's their problem. They can decide whatever. Suffice it to say that this, in my opinion, will validate every doubt that Manila and Tokyo and Canberra have quietly held about whether the US commitments translate into action under pressure. Because that's the only common sense for it. They will have no other. And that in itself will accelerate, in my opinion, the hedging behavior. For example, I will not be surprised, especially from the Philippines. Japan, I doubt it. Australia, I doubt it. But the Philippines might. It will accelerate now the deeper accommodation with Beijing. It's not about being scared of Beijing or being afraid. No. It's a smart move on part of the Philippines. It could also go the other direction for a faster independent military buildup, which, by the way, no matter what Japan does, and no matter what the Philippines does, no matter what Australia does, there will be no match to China. That's what's going to be happening over there. You come back over here to Washington. Should this happen, it will force Washington for an immediate reckoning. Why? Because the US will want to restore access. Doing so is going to raise the real risk. And China is no Iraq, is no Iran, is no Afghanistan, is no Yemen, is no Venezuela, is no Cuba. You got the idea. So, or Washington will have the other option. And you know what the other option is? Is to absorb the humiliation and cede the precedent. Which, by the way, should that happen, and again, I am reading it geopolitically for you, because this will then will be treated in Beijing as the new baseline for future transits. So look what's going on in Strait of Hormuz. Look what's going on in Bab el-Mandeb. Look what's going to be happening soon in the Strait of Malacca. Okay? That's my point. And with this, you're going to have markets and shipping insurers will react to the reduced predictability of the South China Sea transit almost immediately. Given when you know how much trade goes through. So, and I detail all this in my forthcoming book about China, because it's very important to understand. Very important. I didn't give this book a title just out of the blue, randomly. There is a reason. Because we're looking at our next century, the 21st century, that is, where we are, anyway. So here's the caveat, in my opinion, that matters. This scenario, if I may add. This is precisely why the incident of, for example, F-14 PLAN blocked a U.S. carrier group from entering South China Sea. This incident, and we remember, we're talking in the hypothetically. And I don't rule that possibility out. Knowing what I know, I want to rule it out. Might not happen next year, 2 years, 5 years from now, but I will not rule it out. Because, and this is what I'm saying, I wanted to separate fact from fiction. The fiction of these 14 ships, whatever, something like this will not stay quiet if it were real. Because blocking an aircraft carrier, it's not a subtle matter. It's not a subtle event either. No, because it's trackable. And again, I looked at the big, I accessed the interactive one. Yeah, you have to sign in, you have to have some stuff to access to see. And I saw. This is a screenshot. I just wanted to share it with you to know. And this, when I'm pointing out, you don't see my cursor, but I'm pointing out to the area of, if you see here, Mongolia, China, and the little South China Sea down there. So this is what the automatic identification system known as AIS. So, and that tracking system uses, what does it use to track? Is use the transponder on every ship. So you add to that satellite images, you add to that allies, navies, the real one, in real time. So, and this is why I'm saying denying a passage to a U.S. super carrier will be the kind of a move that I strongly believe Beijing will make a comment about it loudly. Because this, in Beijing's view, will be strategic win. The Pentagon will also request some explanations. But the total silence, even from China itself, it tells you where the story is. So, and this is where I have, I'm going to share a screen with you about a statement by a U.S. ambassador in the Philippines, which, by the way, he's just exaggerating the comment. You know how some ambassadors are. So take a look here. Let me make this bigger for you here. I'm going to read it for you quickly. The U.S.'s George Washington Carrier Strike Group advanced capabilities, including the F-35, are upholding freedom of navigation and overflight in the South China Sea. We challenge excessive maritime claims around the world. Ambassador Lee Lepton. First of all, it was no need for a comment like that. And second, as I said, we are not being fair to the Chinese when it comes down to the South China Sea. Yeah, demarcation we did for Europe versus what the one we're doing for the Chinese. It's not right. And again, when I did the history chapter in my book, I addressed this particular part and provide the references to why some parts of the South China Sea belongs to the old empires or dynasties in China. So that's my point. And this, by the way, Hanging G, you are here. I saw your name on the screen. Thank you for sharing your comment when you wrote, who is Trump protecting in Subic Bay military base and Clark Air Base? You know, is he protecting the Philippines, the US, nobody, the Chinese, ASEAN, freedom of navigation in South China Sea, the Israelis and Qataris, Taiwan? You got a good point. You got a good point there, Hank. And thank you for sharing that. Now, let me ask you the next question. And before I do the next question, if the truth matters to you, hit like, subscribe, and tap that bell. No spin, no agenda, just the stories they don't want you to know. Don't watch from the sideline. Be part of the movement. Your support keeps the truth alive. Thank you. The next question will be, how would an incident like this impact the military and strategic calculations for both Beijing and Washington when it comes to Taiwan issue? It's a legitimate question. For Beijing, a successful blockade of a U.S. carrier, even a localized and even a temporary one, will function as a live fire rehearsal for the actual Taiwan contingency. Even though I do believe China has no interest in engaging militarily with Taiwan. Only in one condition, of course, if Taiwan declares independence, which it won't. What China will do, in my opinion, especially with President Xi Jinping, he's been thinking about it. They won't do anything. Let it come on its own and fold into the mainland. And like I said, I was on the ground in Taipei. I talked to people there. They've been fed up. They were fed some narrative that just has nothing to do with the realities. And when I asked the questions as to, well, in this case, if you are to say A, can you anticipate action B as a response? They had no clue what I'm talking about. And that gives you an idea right there. So that's what I'm saying. If we are to think of this, how Beijing is going to see this one here. Because what Beijing is going to see, Beijing is going to evaluate the sea denial against a carrier, U.S. carrier group, is the exact capability the People's Liberation Army will need in Taiwan crisis. Even though they're not going to do it, but they will need that. Because this one, knowing the capabilities of the Chinese, especially when it comes down to A2AD, which is known as anti-access area denial. This action will validate China's anti-access area denial investment that is doing. We're talking about massive missile coverage. We're talking about coordinated fleet maneuvering. All of them can substitute for blue water parity with the US Navy. So the Chinese already processed this. They are aware of this. They know how they're going to proceed with this one. They're not going to, they are thinking about it already. They already did. Strategically, it would likely sort of push Beijing forward regarding the timeline calculus on Taiwan, even though I still believe China is not going to move in on Taiwan militarily at this time. And by the way, even with this scenario, it's not going to be an immediate action. But it's going to be the reason for why China will do this, because it will be towards Washington. The belief that Washington carrier-centric deterrent has practical ceiling, meaning it has a limit. And that political will in Washington to contest a denial like this in sort of near Taiwan, it's far softer than what the rhetoric suggests in Washington. So, yeah. And this is also will signal to Taipei that Beijing has some sort of a powerful coercive signals. And that message will be, and the signal will be, if the US protector can be held off in the South China Sea, what confidence should Taiwan have in a Taiwan Strait scenario? Same argument I can be making about the Philippines. For Washington, from Washington's perspective, the strategic damage will be sort of less about the tactical loss, but more about the credibility when it comes down to Taiwan questions specifically. Yeah, we will care less about Japan and South Korea and Australia. Those can be sacrificed. And I believe also Taiwan to a degree. Because US, Asia Pacific, or Indo-Pacific, whatever term you want to use, strategy, what does it rest on? It rests on the assumption that a carrier, and a carrier group that is, can surge into contested waters despite Chinese pushback. This is the thinking in Washington. So an actual denial by the Chinese will face the Pentagon and force it to sort of accelerate the shift that is already underway towards distributed, harder to target power projection. That's what it will do, which in a simple language will be, we're going to add more submarines, okay? We're going to add more long-range strikes. We're going to disperse basins. And we're going to rely less on a carrier as a visible symbol. But there is a problem there Washington didn't calculate, is that the Chinese missiles are within reach to every base in the neighborhood. And as a matter of fact, I have a clip for you at the end. I'm going to show you a map. I'll show you a clip that exactly disclose this particular aspect. Yeah, as a matter of fact, let me play it for you right now. I'm not going to wait till the end. Naval preparation. Let me make sure if this one here. Not this one. Just bear with me right here, guys, because I save things in order. Okay, here is the clip, and I'm going to play it right now for you to see, because I want you to see. And there is a reason for this one here. Take a listen, please.
Copy of this U.S. air base in the desert to practice destroying it. Because if this base falls in the first 10 minutes, America loses Taiwan. The base is Andersen Air Force Base on the island of Guam. It's tiny. It's 7,000 miles from Washington. But in Beijing, every general knows its coordinates by heart, because Andersen is not just a base. It's the warehouse for World War III. Here's why. America's biggest base in Asia is Kadena in Japan, but Kadena is only 400 miles from China. The Pentagon knows it dies in the first 10 minutes of a war. Missiles would crater the runways and burn every jet on the ground. So America moved everything valuable 1,800 miles away to Guam. Every B-52 bomber, every B-2 stealth bomber, enough fuel for 3 months of war, enough bombs for a year. Guam was supposed to be untouchable. China decided to make it touchable. In 2020, the Chinese Air Force released a video that terrified Washington. It showed their nuclear H-6 bombers taking off, flying across the ocean, and then, on the targeting camera, you could clearly see Andersen Air Force Base, the runways, the fuel farm, the bomber parking spots, and then a simulated strike. The American commander had to go on camera and call it propaganda to calm everyone down. It wasn't propaganda. Satellite photos proved it. Deep in the Taklamakan Desert, China built full-scale, concrete replicas of American bases. Not models. Real runways, real hangars. One was a perfect copy of Kadena, one was a perfect copy of Andersen. They build them, they bomb them, they measure the crater, and they rebuild them. They are practicing until every missile lands exactly where an American jet is parked. And they built a specific missile for this one job. It's called the DF-26. In Washington, they call it the Guam Killer. 2,500-mile range, hypersonic. It flies at 18 times the speed of sound and can carry a nuclear warhead. No air defense can reliably stop it. And it was built for one purpose, to erase Anderson. Because Chinese generals did the math. If you destroy Anderson, you create a 5,000-mile black hole in the Pacific. From Hawaii to Japan, there is nowhere to land, refuel, or rearm. A U.S. bomber would have to fly 12 hours just to get to Taiwan and 12 hours back. It's impossible. Taiwan would fall before America even arrives. That's why America is now doing something it hasn't done since 1944. It's sending bulldozers into the jungles of islands like Tinian, the same island that launched the atomic bomb on Japan. Those airfields were swallowed by jungle for 80 years. Now they are being rebuilt overnight. The new plan is simple. Don't put all your jets on one big target. Spread them across 20 tiny jungle airstrips, because every war game ends the same way. If Anderson dies in the first 10 minutes, everything else dies with it. So I have to ask you, did America make a genius move putting everything in Guam, or did it build the biggest sitting duck in military history? Tell me in the comments.
Very interesting. And by the way, for Japan, is Japan a sovereign nation? It's not a laughing matter, but you get the idea. So, and that is, again, just to think of it this way. So, and politically, this one will sharpen the debate in Washington. And even with so-called allies, I call them subservient states, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Australia, about what? The debates will be about the current U.S. force posture in the region for a Taiwan contingency. Because all we're going to be doing basically is funding funding Taiwan for more weapons, whatever. But they stand no chance if the U.S. bases are within reach of Chinese missiles. That is, again, where I am really glad that this happened for me to be addressing this scenario. Because the irony is that the incident could push now both militaries towards the same conclusion, that a show telegraphed carrier-led response to a Taiwan crisis is now less viable, which that in itself reshaped the planning on both sides towards a much more faster, more dispersed, and a higher risk option. And that's exactly what I argued back then when I wrote the Iran book and the conversation about China came up, or when I was writing at the time. Here is what I wrote. Is China preparing for a major war? To understand these dynamics better, one should grasp China's tactical and strategic moves. For instance, China embarked on a major developments of infrastructure in the South China Sea, developments that include an airstrip big enough for military aircraft. I argue that China buildup allows Beijing to flex its muscles, a move that has already introduced fear and anxiety in neighboring countries. Japan, Brunei, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia. Taiwan is an island of China. Malaysia and Vietnam. But basically, China sends a message to the United States that its days of influence over the Pacific are numbered. While China built up in the South China Sea is not limited only to basic infrastructure, roads, water pipelines, and so forth. No, it's focused on military structure, airstrips for military aircraft, radar towers, and so forth. Undoubtedly communicates to the West that China's territorial ambitions and desire will be pursued because to secure the waterways. That was my point back then, 2017, 16, when I did the research. And this leads us to the next question. What are the geopolitical and security consequences of an incident like this? And the incident is hypothetically, if the Chinese block the entrance of the US carrier into the South China Sea. What will be the, right there, I'm sorry, not Luzon, right there. The most immediate consequence will be a scramble among US allies. Why? Because they need to reassess their reliability. The reliability of whom? Of the United States. Because what they're counting on is the US has this deterrence, but that's not going to intimidate the Chinese. And what South Korea, Philippines, Australia, and Japan are thinking is that, oh, American extended deterrence is it is across the entire Indo-Pacific, not just around Taiwan. I don't think so. Because if China did that, that means there is no deterrence at all. So you have Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, and Australia have all built now their defense posture, which stand no chance against the Chinese, around the assumption that U.S. naval power can reach contested waters when needed, as needed. And this is where that scenario comes in. It demonstrated denial. Event will push now Tokyo and Canberra, especially those two, to accelerate independent capabilities investments, militarily speaking. And the one I see, I know some analysts did here in the Pentagon, did some scenarios where South Korea and Japan will go for nuclear bomb. No, it won't happen. It won't. But what they can do is they can sort of accelerate other capabilities. For example, there will be a long-range strike, which means missiles. They could either upgrade or consider other types of submarines. They could also invest in counter area denial access systems, that is. But at the same time, while Canberra and Tokyo are doing this, maybe Seoul, South Korea, maybe, Philippines is in a different, because the pressure on Manila into this will push Manila into an uncomfortable position. Because what it's going to be, there will be two choices. Either you're going to have to deal with the consequences of facing China. So literally Manila is stuck because we'll be forced into uncomfortable choice between either deeper accommodation with Beijing, okay, or it will be doubling down on the mutual defense treaty with the Americans. Regardless, or whether they have learned anything from Ukraine, that the US is not going to come to their defense. And this is where Philippines now is trying to push this issue through ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So, but those are weaker in comparison to what's going on. Except when you think about what Vietnam and Malaysia did. They enter into bilateral talks with the Chinese. So, and that is why both countries, Vietnam and Malaysia, hedged their bet on the Chinese instead of the Americans. On a global level, remember I talked to you about Beijing's perspective, Washington perspectives. Then we're going to think about the global aspects. An incident like this, meaning the Chinese blocking the entrance of the U.S. aircraft carrier, will certainly reverberate beyond the Asia-Pacific. Why? Because it will be as a sign of a contested theaters. Another one, beside West Asia, Middle East, the Black Sea, the Arctic, the gray zone denial tactics against a superior conventional force. That means it can work. Look what Iran is doing to the Americans now. We just don't want to admit. As a matter of fact, members of U.S. Congress now saying we have lost the war. It's just we won't admit it. And that is why this will force other countries. As a matter of fact, Iran learned from what happened to the Americans in Iraq, what happened to the Americans in Yemen, what happened to the Americans in Afghanistan. This scenario in the South China Sea will potentially inspire other countries to test and push against U.S. power everywhere. And it will do one more thing globally. It will certainly strain U.S. credibility about this called freedom of navigation operations as a doctrine writ large. That means it won't hold up anymore. Since the entire premise is that contested transits remain physically and politically viable. So a successful denial, like what's going on right now in the Strait of Hormuz, let me put the map for you. And a successful denial in the hypothetical, as we mentioned, about the South China Sea will undercut that premise for every future endeavor, not just in South China Sea. That's my point. Okay. And domestically and diplomatically, Washington will face pressure to respond in a way that's restored credibility, but it can't. It won't be able to, because the damage has already been done. That's the point of this. It's because we won't be able to restore. It just won't work, because look where we are right now. So it's not going to be done. Once again, I did argue this point in my Iran book. Let me share this excerpt quickly here. The takeaway is that China's assertive stance regarding South China Sea suggests that the United States and China will eventually collide if their interests are threatened. What concerns me the most is that China's already assertive security posture persists, signifies a U.S. leadership decline in the Pacific. As yet, other crises become. Despite all that, China strikes me as a pragmatic nation, one that takes short but assured steps rather than long but unsteady strides. Moreover, when it comes to its security interests, be they in the Middle East or South China Sea, Beijing will be disciplined in how it proceeds to gauge its military interventions, whatever the cause may be. The American foreign policy establishment should be careful not to antagonize China beyond what the U.S. is willing to do, because the U.S. could discover that a military conflict with China is no small matter. That is the point. And as a matter of fact, let me quickly open up the survey, which, by the way, I thank you all for participating in the survey about the relevant question, one-on-one conflict between the United States and China, who will win? 82% of you said China, 2% said the US, 12% said none, and 3% said don't know. We had almost 2,500 participants in this survey, and thank you for participating in that. And this leads me to my last question. Why should you care? Why literally you decided to sit here for this 15 minutes or whatever the time is to listen to me? Well, one, because most people covering this story are reading the same press releases or standby clips. I am not. I've done regional security work in Washington. I wrote books about Iran and China, and book about China is coming up. And I stood in Taiwan and mainland. So when I say here was a real PLAN denial capability looks like, or for example, when I say here is how Beijing rhetoric compares to what I saw on the ground, that's not a commentary. It's a pattern recognition built from direct exposure. Most talking points simply don't have. This is again why I want you to be careful what you listen to, because you are not just getting an opinion. What I'm sharing with you is not an opinion. You are getting, what you get in here is a filter, some sort of that catches now that difference between what is a viral claim or a misinformation or a lie or a fabricated info, okay, and the verified assessment, which is exactly what's missing in a story like this that turned out to be built on a fabricated blockades. So, the other part of why is it important for you is practical, because this isn't a background noise. It is not. It is a preview of the one Asia Pacific flashpoint. There is one Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific flashpoint that actually touches your life. Taiwan, semiconductor, trade routes, alliance credibility. Because what you walk away with from this analysis, not just informed, but equipped. This is how you're going to be, to see through the next viral military claim themselves, because understanding what actually at stake versus manufactured for clicks and what have you. That's the trade. So 50 minutes of your time for a lens you can reuse every time the next China did whatever headline hits your feed. That is the important. So, and of course, I have to mention to you that regarding the South China Sea transits, the trade routes, the microchips, and all that stuff that are in your phone, in your car, in your bank, in every supply chain built on the chips manufactured in Chain 2, all of them impact you. So, because this is real time. It's real-time test. Whether the security architecture that the world has run on since 1945, that's basically the American primacy guarantee in open ceiling, whether it is still operative or it is just coming to an end. And that affects more than just US-China relations. It shapes whether Japan, whether South Korea will go nuclear, whether the Philippines bagwagon and join China instead, like Vietnam and Malaysia did, whether smaller states trust any U.S. security guarantee at all. Ask the Gulf states, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. So watching how this plays out isn't just some sort of tracking military story. I don't track stuff, because what you are watching here, you're watching that the rule-based of World War II order being tested in real time. And whoever blinks first set the terms for the next few decades. Now you know why I put the title for my forthcoming book. All right, I'm done here. By the way, I'm going to do a live for you, a very interesting analysis about, remember I mentioned about some states, and I was going to think about the reliability of the US. I'm referring to the Middle East or West Asia. So I will be talking to you soon about an agreement just being reached. So I was aware of it. I don't jump on a wagon quickly. I do my homework because I have to study that agreement. Don't fall for this. It's nothing but hypes. No more. So I might be doing this for you on, provide you analysis on Friday. I'll let you know. Here is my conclusion, and I am going to be playing some interesting clips for you. So you stayed with me long enough, so just hold on a few more minutes here. Here is my conclusion. Having worked on regional security aspects in Washington, okay, having written extensively on West Asia, having stood on the ground on both sides of the Taiwan Strait myself, I've learned over the years, and if over almost 25 years now, I've learned to separate viral claims from verified reality. And that distinction is only going to matter more as this rivalry between US and China sort of sharpens. So I'm going to leave you with one question, and I will really enjoy reading your feedback on it. Here's the question. If China can hold the line in the gray zone without firing a shot, has the era of American naval primacy already quietly ended? So make sure you drop me your comments in the comment section and I read every one of them, and I'll answer some. So I will greatly appreciate it. So, all right, quickly, let me see. Thank you for some donors for the upcoming trip, and I'll do the clips for you. First of all, I want to say thank you to Army with Harmony. Truly appreciate you. Thank you, Dr. O. 3 months will not be enough. Delusion. Thank you very much. Appreciate you for your kind support. So, and I'll take this opportunity to say thank you to Say It Like It Is for buying me many cups of coffees in support of the channel. Truly appreciate you. You've been an avid supporter. You've been with me for a while, and I am very, very grateful for your support for the channel. So thank you, Say It Like It Is, for your generosity. Also, I want to say thank you to Ken C for your support of the channel and the content that I post here for the community. I'm very, very grateful. I also want to thank S.C. Lee for your generosity in buying me so many cups of teas in support of my upcoming Asia trip. I'm very, very, very grateful for your generosity, and I can't thank you enough. And speaking of that, I need to show you an update of where we are regarding the, we are short about, and by the way, if we ever cross this number, what I'm going to use that funding for is to go to another location within Asia to report to you. So I just want you to know where that money is going to be spent. So, because that's my responsibility towards you. So once again, here is the link for those who wants to support an upcoming trip to Asia. I'm very, very grateful to you for that. All right, let's do clips because I have so many. I'm so excited about the clips here because they are very, very interesting. So I'm going to start with the first one. And the first one is going to be about, shows you how corrupted our system. What I'm going to show you is the clip of members of Congress from both parties that are supporting AIPAC and getting money from AIPAC. So take a listen. And I'm sure for my American viewers, I'm sure one of your members or your representative is on this list. All right, let's play this
Banks,
one.
Barrasso, Blackburn, Britt, Capito, Cassidy, Collins, Cornyn, Cotton, Kramer, Crapo, Cruz, Ernst, Fisher, Graham, Grassley, Haggerty, Hawley, Hoven, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Justice, Kennedy, Langford, Lummis, Marshall, McConnell, McCormick, Moody, Mullen, Ricketts, Risch, Rounds, Schmidt, Scott of South Carolina, Sullivan, Thune, Tillis, and Wicker. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Bozeman, no. Mr. Budd, no. Mr. Lee, no. Mr. Moran, no. Mr. Husted, no. Mr. Scott of Florida, no. Mr. Tuberville, no. Mr. Moreno, no. Mr. Young, no. On this bank.
It shows you. It shows you. What a shame. What a shame. Next one is about U.S. out of West Asia. Remember when I told you last time? The only way is for those countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, all of them, to ask the U.S. to leave. They still maintain diplomatic relations, but ask them to move, ask the U.S. to move its military from their territories. So take a listen, please.
Supreme National Security Council just dropped the ultimate bombshell. The Strait of Hormuz stays closed until America fully corrects its behavior. No threats. End the wars on Iran and its allies. Lift the blockade. Pay full damages. Scrap the sanctions. And return the stolen assets, period. The Oman deal changes nothing. Foreign Minister Araji made that crystal clear. Meanwhile, ADNOC confirmed Iran just nailed another Abu Dhabi tanker on the Oman route, the latest in a string of hits. Trump's response? Posting AI pictures of himself as a 4-star general next to Patton and MacArthur while the real world burns. J.D. Vance trots out on regime media with pure fiction, claiming demining progress, no tolls, and oil flowing like nothing happened, all to prop up the markets and the Ponzi scheme. These pathetic lies only expose how weak and out of weapons the United States has become, pushing Saudi Arabia into new alliances with Turkey and Pakistan. The dollar, the bond market, and the mountain of debt Trump piled on will all pay the price.
Yeah, spot on. Here is the next one. Here is the one actually that I wanted to, as I mentioned earlier, I did mention this one few months ago about the need for Americans to leave. So you have now protests in Kuwait, which we don't hear much about. So I'll let you take a listen here, please.
In Kuwait took to the streets demanding the removal of U.S. military bases from the country. We pray for peace, wisdom for leaders in the region, and for solutions that bring last. Protesters in Kuwait took.
Yeah, it's starting. That's the beginning for that. This one is also about, this one has to do with, of course, the truth that has not been reported. This is from an individual who knows someone in a German hospital where the military, U.S. military service members are coming in trove. Take a listen, please. Share. Let me start it from the beginning here.
A friend of mine from Germany sent me a message and said that at the hospital where they're bringing the troops in, they had to sign NDAs to not say anything about the number of the troops that are being brought in, that are either in critical condition, that are wounded, or even that have expired. Now, Warhorse, which is a military magazine, verified this last week. And they said that the administration was lying about the number of casualties and the number of fatalities that we've incurred in the Gulf War. They're making these cats sign NDAs.
Okay, it's a little bit long. I just want to highlight to you. So, yeah, they're making now employees at the hospital to sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDAs. So it shows you where things are. The next few clips is going all to be about China. There is a reason for that. So we'll start with the first one. And the first one has to do with the lies coming about China. There is a reason why those lies are propagating here in the US. Take a listen, please.
The United States lies so much. The main reason the United States lies so much about China and spends so much propaganda against them is that the Chinese government actually works for their people. And one of the main reasons China's government's been able to continue doing amazing things for their citizens, like completely eradicating poverty, is that they execute corrupt billionaires and politicians who steal from the people. China has executed 14 people with a net worth of at least 1 billion yuan, or $155 million, in the last 8 years as part of Xi Jinping's anti-corruption drive. The most recent to be executed was Bai Tianhui, the former general manager of China Hurong International Holdings, a subsidiary of China Hurong Asset Management, a state-owned enterprise that was set up to deal with bad loans from state banks during the Asian financial crisis. Now, this is a state-owned enterprise that functions similarly to TARP in the US in the 2008 financial collapse.
So you got the idea, and I wish you might want to check a post that I did on my X account, and I talked about something there pertaining to this one here. So there is another one, and that's, to me, I've always believed that's how you deal with corrupted officials. So take a listen, please, here. And I was aware of many incidents of high-ranking officials inside China that's been caught in corruption, and the government decided to move forward with the appropriate punishment. Take a listen.
Shock the world once again with its brutal crackdown on corruption. In many countries, powerful officials accused of stealing public money often escape punishment, but China takes a very different approach. Reports say official Tong Reijin was sentenced to death after allegedly embezzling 268 million yuan. Meanwhile, Former defense ministers Wei Fenghe and Li Shangfu were also hit with suspended death sentences under President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign. China believes harsh punishments like these help keep the government powerful, disciplined, and under control.
Serving the people. So I did a video a few months ago, actually a year and a half ago almost, about those two generals. So just go to the channel and you can find it. You can find it there. So next one is about a testing of a new fighter jet in China. Very, very interesting. Oh, let me share the screen. Sorry. Take a listen here, please.
China just unveiled a fighter jet so advanced that defense experts around the world stopped what they were doing and took a second look. The J-50 can fly at twice the speed of sound, carry missiles that hit targets 300 kilometers away, and do all of this while being nearly invisible to radar. That last part is what has everyone talking. Stealth aircraft are not new. The United States has had them for decades. But the J-50 uses a completely new combination of shapes, materials, and technology that makes earlier stealth jets look like they belong in a museum. And China built this largely on its own, which is what has the aviation world buzzing. Here is the context that makes this so remarkable. Back in the 1980s and 90s, China was buying fighter jets from Russia because it simply could not build competitive ones itself. Fast forward to today, and it is rolling out one of the most sophisticated combat aircraft ever built. That is not a small jump. That is a leap so large, it is hard to wrap your head around. If you enjoy content like this, hit that.
Okay, I just want to, usually the long ones, I'm not going to play them for because you've been with for almost an hour, so I need to move on with this stuff. But to give you an idea of what's the, it is this one is about I did the video already, but I wanted to also to confirm to you that the media did not disclose the presence of the Chinese naval defying the US, and that is, again, take a listen here, please.
Major escalation could. This is huge breaking news coming in. A major escalation could be unfolding in the Gulf. Reports say a Chinese naval fleet is heading toward the Strait of Hormuz to escort oil tankers through a U.S. blockade. Now, the main thing to understand is this. Around 90% of Iran's oil exports go to China, so any disruption doesn't just hit Tehran. It directly impacts Beijing's energy supply. That's why China appears to be stepping in more openly. China already has naval activity in the region, including escort fleets, and a Type 052DL destroyer has now been reported near the Strait of Hormuz, intensifying fears of a direct Sino-U.S. naval showdown. This kind of advanced warship presence signals China is not just watching, it is preparing to protect its interests. Chinese officials have also issued strong warnings, saying any interference with their vessels could trigger a serious response. If both sides continue to push forward, this could turn from a regional standoff into a direct U.S.-China confrontation at sea, something the world has been trying to avoid. If both sides continue to push forward, this could turn from a regional standoff into a direct U.S.-China confrontation at sea.
It won't get to that because, you know, we understand the ramifications of something like that one. So. Next one is the Chinese developments of a special type of boats. Take a listen here. Actually, this one is not a. There's a picture and there is soundtrack on it. I usually don't play soundtracks, but that's all it is. I just want you to be aware. China's first 100-ton unmanned boat just sailed 4,200 kilometers solo across open sea, setting a world record. Unmanned, that's the key. So you can just see why Chinese naval assets are. And of course, I already played the clip for the China building a copy of the U.S. Anderson base in Guam. So the next one, and I have only one or two more here. This one is about the speed train. Very, very interesting. Take a look here.
First, it feels like we're filming from an airplane, but down on the look at this shot. At first, it feels like we're filming from an airplane, but down on the tracks, something is moving insanely fast. That's China's high-speed train, and the speed on the screen says 603 kilometers per hour. That's about 375 miles per hour. Now watch this moment. The plane and the train appear in the same frame. From this angle, the train almost looks like it's racing the plane. But here's the craziest part. Inside the cabin, nobody looks nervous. No shaking, no panic. People are just sitting there, calm and relaxed, like this is a normal ride to work. Outside the window, another train flashes by in less than a second. At this kind of speed, you would expect everything to shake. But then comes the coin test. A coin is standing upright near the window. The train is flying down the track, but the coin barely moves. That's not just speed, that's precision, that's stability. And that's why China's high-speed rail doesn't just look like transportation. It looks like the future moving on steel.
And that's true. That is true. I was on the speed train between Shanghai and Beijing, 346 kilometers, and I did put a bottle on the tray. Didn't shake at all. It's really put this country to shame. We don't even have a speed train between here, Dallas, and let's say Houston. It's a 4-hour drive. We don't even have a speed train. So where's our tax dollars going? You know, I have no problem paying taxes, but I have a problem when the tax is just being, do you know in China, you only pay, for example, for a car, when you buy a car, the registration, you only pay one time. We pay every year. It's because the system is intended to keep everybody almost like slave. That's what it is. So I don't mind if the taxes are being used to build infrastructure like the Chinese. And the last one is the reality in America. So I can't shy away from, and as a matter of fact, I am thinking I'm going to start to address certain social issues here in America because it's my responsibility to do so. Take a listen, please.
Now it feels like a punishment. Living in America right now feels like a punishment. You wake up already behind, you go to work just to stay broke, and you watch the cost of everything rise while your paycheck doesn't move an inch. Groceries are a luxury. Rent is robbery. Healthcare is a joke. And somehow we're the ones blamed for not budgeting better. People are working 2-3 jobs and still choosing between food or gas. Families are crammed into apartments because buying a house became a fantasy. You can't afford to get sick. You can't afford to rest. You can't afford to exist. But they keep telling us the economy is strong. Strong for who? Because it sure as hell isn't the people doing the work. We're out here treading water while billionaires build rockets, politicians trade stocks, and corporations raise prices just because they can. We were promised opportunity. We got survival. And what makes this worse is watching people blame themselves. Like somehow you failed because you can't afford a 1-bedroom anymore. Like you didn't do enough when the truth is the math just stopped adding up years ago. They told us to work harder, but never told us they'd change the finish line. This isn't a country full of lazy people. It's a country full of exhausted ones. Simple as that. Living in America right now feels like a punishment. You wake up already behind.
Yeah, he's right. He is right, and it's sad to see what has become of the United States. So I wrote an article about this particular topic. If you wanna read it, so it's right there, the American Dream. Let me put the link for you in the chat box so you can read it if you want to. So it's unfortunate, but that's the reality we're in. So. All right, that's all I have to share with you. Thank you for your patience for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
freedom's greatest hour of danger is now.
Sense. we could go on forever on this one, Judge, because they didn't bother to explain to anybody what this is all about. There was no leak of the final text, only a few snippets. All of them focused on the NATO's Article 5, an attack on one of us is an attack on the three of us. And they were emphasizing deterrence. But this looks more like deterrence theater. It's very hard to imagine that, for instance, if something or someone or some entity goes after Saudi Arabia, the Turks and the Pakistanis will weigh in with the second largest NATO army and with Pakistan's nuclear power. So I was trying to get a direct answer from our Pakistani mediator friends, Larry and I. The best we could get is that the ambiguity of it all is the policy. The policy for the three of them. Okay,
well,
we're going to be... Yes, go ahead, please.
One of them is in NATO. Turkey is a member of NATO. How complicated can this get?
Absolutely, Judge. They are the eastern arm of NATO, the second largest NATO army outside of the United States, with enormous interest in being part of the integration of Eurasia. But for the moment, they are the other two major players, Russia and China, they keep the Turks outside because they simply cannot trust Ankara. So it's simple as that. Ankara is not a member of BRICS and is not a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, although they try very, very hard on both cases. Russia and China, they don't trust them. Simple as that. And Iran, which is a full member of both BRICS and SCO, it's complicated. They are neighbors, their relations are improving, but still, to give you an idea, there's more trust between Iran and Pakistan than between Iran and Turkey. Because the Iranians, the Pakistanis, the Russians and the Chinese and the Central Asians, they all know what Turkey really wants across Eurasia. It's what they call the Greater Turan Project, which means an amalgamation and an organization of Turkic-speaking peoples with Ankara at the top. They might be interested in more deals with Ankara, but not with Ankara at the top and dictating terms. For instance, there's a fascinating panel in the Astana Museum in Kazakhstan. It's a whole room. There's a huge map in this room with the list of Turkic peoples, over 40 different ethnic groups. So we find Uyghurs in Xinjiang, Western China, of course, Kazakhs, we find Kyrgyz, Turkmen, etc. But this is, it's not that these are subordinated to Turkey. These are peoples who speak Turkic languages or Turkish-derived languages. And on top of it, they originated in the Altai Mountains, which is a large region that nowadays encompasses parts of Russia, parts of Kazakhstan, parts of Mongolia. So this has nothing to do with Ankara, which is on the extreme left of the map in Anatolia, controlling everything else.
What is this new arrangement? And then we'll get to Iran in a minute. What is this new arrangement, Pakistan, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia? What is its effect on BRICS?
Well, BRICS so far, they haven't said a word about it. Just like, by the way, the United States has, there's no formal reaction by Washington about this Mecca deal. Once again, because it's so ambiguous that everybody is scratching their heads. Okay, if there is a pact, it's against whom? And there's an enormous list of possible candidates. The first one will be Israel, in fact. And this proves why the Zionists are slightly in discomfort about the whole thing. It's not essentially against Iran, because if it was, the relationship between Iran and Pakistan will be already broken. And apparently, it was not reconfirmed, but Minister of Foreign Relations of Turkey, Fidan, he called the Iranians before the signing in Mecca, and he basically said, look, guys, this is not against you. And the Iranians quietly will say, okay, let's see what the facts will bring later on. So is this a photo op and a PR coup for MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia? Definitely.
Got it.
Will that protect him from anything from now on? Nobody knows.
As recently as 2 days ago, President Trump made another one of his proclamations that the Strait of Hormuz is totally open to anybody the United States wants to go in there, that the United States Navy has effectively erected a steel wall and won't let anything in or out that affects Iran. Does anybody believe him when he says that? Anybody in the international scene?
Not even camel caravans in the Gobi Desert, Judge. Nobody believes. Just look at the facts nowadays. And to look at the facts, you have to listen to one person, essentially, Mohsen Rezai. Mohsen Rezai, since Monday, in fact, the exact date is Monday, started on Monday, only a few days ago. He is not only the new Secretary General of the Supreme National Security Council in Iran, but also the personal representative of leader Mojtaba Khamenei. Anybody who will check Mohsen Rezai's X account and see what's posted over there, this means that this comes also directly from Mojtaba Khamenei, the leader.
Or here's what go ahead,
please.
Go ahead, please.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead, Judge.
Well,
Okay.
here's what General Rezai said just the other day about the Strait of Hormuz. Chris, number 16.
The Strait of Hormuz will not be opened. No American warship has the right to enter the Persian Gulf. The American presence in the Persian Gulf is the main cause of the insecurity of the last 50 years. Without the US leaving the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz being controlled by the countries of the region themselves, especially us and the country of Oman, who are on both sides of this strait, it is impossible for security to be established. The end of the war is also in our hands. We will look at the end of the war when, first of all, we have received all our damages from America. Secondly, we must reach a 100% guarantee about the future, which is not possible without the US leaving the Persian Gulf. Therefore, the second condition is the withdrawal of the US from the Persian Gulf.
These are basically the conditions that are laid out in the Memorandum of Understanding signed 2 months ago this weekend.
Absolutely. And by the way, that the 60-day clause just expired.
Wow.
By now, according to the MOU, they should be on the table actually discussing details. And that has not even started because the US blew up the MOU. So this a minute and a half that you played of Mohsen Rezai, Judge, it's all there in detail. Not only what was signed by both parties in the MOU, but what the tone of the discussions these past few days with Pakistan, Oman, and Qatar. And obviously that was relayed to the Americans as well. And behind all of them, as we all know, is China. China wants the Strait of Hormuz open for obvious reasons. They are a major trading power, but respecting Iran's conditions. And Iran is a key strategic partner of China. So, very, very simple. If there is something moving in the Strait of Hormuz in the negotiations, means the Americans need to fulfill their commitments that, by the way, signed by the President of the United States in the MOU. Otherwise, absolutely no chance this will move, and we would be delving into ominously the possibility of a forever war, a war that could drag on
No,
and
you
on.
you read my mind. I was going to save that to the end of our conversation, but since you raised it, should we in the United States, should the people in the Middle East, should the world fear another forever war because the president of the United States can't find an off-ramp without admitting his incredibly poor judgment in starting this war?
And admitting a strategic defeat, Judge, which in geopolitical terms, this is the mother of all mistakes, in fact. Well, let's look at how I'm starting to calling them the three musketeers: Russia, Iran, and China. A more elaborate definition, which I was using until literally yesterday, is the new Primakov triangle. Primakov in the late 90s coined Russia, India, and China as the Primakov triangle, the three nations, then civilization states, which would organize the remaking of Eurasia in the 21st century. So now we have the three musketeers. Let's say this is a pop adaptation. Netflix could even do a movie about that. Okay, so the three musketeers are applying, let's say, titanium gloves, titanium tourniquets enveloped in a velvet glove in three different points. The first one is the Strait of Hormuz. What Iran is doing and their policy in the Strait of Hormuz is fully supported by China and in the background also by Russia, because they all understand that this war from the beginning was and is an oil war and an oil choke point war, in an oil against an oil choke point that transits and markets currencies away from the petrodollar, especially the petro yuan. The Russians, they have a system of payment settlements called A7 by a Russian bank, and now becoming very, very popular in Africa, which is circumventing the international system controlled by the US big time. And the number three is the Chinese new sovereign law that forces any Chinese company not to obey US sanctions, and every sanction applied against a Chinese or other company in a Chinese jurisdiction will be met with, obviously, lawsuits. So we have the three musketeers applying pressure in three crucial points that directly affect the unilateral domination of the US. So this is what matters much more than this photo op Sunni-style Mecca plan, in fact.
Do those three musketeers have a banking system?
Now we are reaching the key problem, Judge. And for all of us who have been following the BRICS closely, which is my case, we entered despair territory a few months ago because it's blah, 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 and nothing happens. We're going to have, by the way, the BRICS summit next month in Delhi. So less than 1 month from now. Are they going to come up with something extraordinary? No, especially because it's India that is chairing. But of course, the Russians, they are doing it their way. This system, the A7, which is Reuters came out with an enormous article about that, sounding all sorts of red alarms about it, because this is Russia in, they're trying to control the financial system all across Africa. No, these are African governments looking at the way to bypass American interference or effects of American sanctions or secondary sanctions by using basically a stable coin. This A7 system is a Russian stable coin. And this can be adopted by scores of nations all across the global south, even before BRICS come up with their, I used to call it the BRICS lab. Yes, they have different forms of currency settlement, payment settlement that they are testing, but this can go on forever. It's too bureaucratic. So you need an initiative like that that's very practical. And you have a guy in Nigeria wanting to buy something from Iran, for instance, he's going to use the Russian A7. He's not going to use the international financial system. And this is already working in practice.
Wow. I'm terrified at the thought of a forever war, Pepe.
Yes, of course, all of us, yes.
I mean, don't the Americans recognize their humiliating defeat? At least, don't they recognize it in a non-public way? I mean, Trump and Hegseth probably never will because they're fanatics. Hegseth for military glory, Trump for personal glory. But don't the people around them understand this can't go on?
The current setup in the Trump White House and the Trump administration as a whole, Judge, I don't see so. I don't think so, especially because they are tremendously unprepared and their knowledge of geopolitics, and especially across Eurasia, is next to zero. Somebody who could understand, and he's a very wily operator and a very smart guy, is Elbridge Colby, the guy who actually redacted the national security doctrine. But there is a huge problem. He is a first-class xenophobe. He doesn't understand China. He only sees China in terms of a threat, but he doesn't bother to study China and how China operates globally. But the most important element is the people we don't see, American elites. And I'm sure you know, and our audience knows who we're talking about. The guys who never appear anywhere. They are too powerful. They go to exclusive clubs. They decide what to do, and they don't even bother to show up on TV or in Bilderberg or all that crap, you know. These are the people who actually run the US. Can you imagine for them to admit a strategic defeat, which would mean in practice admit that everything that they always imagined will last throughout the 21st century, like it lasted from 1945 to the end of the millennium, will collapse? They can't.
Last topic, is China dumping US dollars?
Yes. Like there's no tomorrow.
Right. What is likely to be the effect of that?
It's, Chinese, Judge. It's always very long term. But dumping treasuries all across the board constantly, and if it's at the current volume, it will take only a few years for the whole thing to disappear. And obviously the effects then will start to be felt perhaps between 1 and 2 years from now. They are more preoccupied at the moment in China with applying the 5-year plan until 2030, which is to diversify their investments and diversify their economy and, let's say, digitalize their economy to the tune of 70% of the whole Chinese economy. This is their number one priority. And their international priority is to solidify their BRICS, SCO, Global South alliances all across the Global South, especially inside Eurasia. And of course, part of that is preventing a collapse of Iran. And this is a policy shared by the Russia-China Strategic Partnership. Because they are interlocking strategic partnerships of the three musketeers. Oh, I love this new AI Three Musketeers. This is so cool.
Yeah, you can thank Chris and his nimble fingers.
Oh, Chris, oh man, you do this in 1 minute. It's absolutely outstanding.
Let me go to one last subject. What do your Pakistani friends tell you about any negotiations? Are the Pakistanis talking to the Iranians? Probably yes. Are the Pakistanis talking to the U.S.? And if they are, to whom? Are Witkoff and Kushner still in the picture?
No. Tweedledum and Tweedledee, bye-bye. And the Iranians said from the beginning, we're not talking to those clowns again. So what we get from our Pakistani mediators and sources, what they tell Larry and I, is that, yes, we are still relaying our messages to the Americans. But as best as we can tell, this is not 100% confirmed. These are people linked to J.D. Vance's office. This is a very important information because it can be interpreted in many ways. They didn't get into too many details because they don't want to burn, of course, their relationship with their new American interlocutors. But they could be saying that there's nobody in the Trump camp, let's put it this way, talking to them, or they could be saying that most of the talking goes through J.D. Vance's people, or both, or all of the above. What they do say is that, look, we still believe that this window of opportunity for the MOU dead cat is not dead yet. Of course, for the moment is in deep coma again. But it could be resuscitated. But there's only one condition. And this is the conditions that the Iranians told the Pakistanis. If the Americans start to fulfill their commitments in the MOU. Otherwise, exactly what Mohsen Rezai say in that clip that you just played. There's absolutely no chance of anything. And the Iranians are running the clock, and the Iranians are not in a hurry.
Last question. One of the chatters just put this thought, the people that write to us during the show, just put this thought in my mind. Does Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State of the United States. Does he have anything whatsoever to do with any negotiations between Iran and the U.S.?
Can you believe that U.S. Secretary of State never talked to Arakchi?
Wow. Arakchi is the foreign minister of Iran.
Foreign minister of Iran. Never. He never talked to Arakchi. How can you have a negotiation at the highest foreign ministry level between two nations when they don't talk to each other? That's my it's not a good answer, but this is the answer we have at the moment.
Got it. Got it. Pepe, thank you, my dear man. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a great weekend. I know you will, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
And thanks for the 3 Musketeers.
Oh, yes. Yeah. There you go. There you go. Chris will send you the link so you'll have it for your own use. Thank you, my friend.
Brilliant. And I'll tribute it to you guys, and I'll put it everywhere. Thank you so much.
God bless you. All right. All the best. Yeah. Thank you. Coming up later today, the end of the day, the end of the week, the Intelligence Community Roundtable with Larry Johnson, Joe Kent, and Scott Ritter. 4 o'clock this afternoon, U.S. Eastern. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.
Iran just thwarted a ground attack against it. Ibrahim Azizi, not this man, this is Mohsen Rezai. The head of the National Security and Foreign Policy Committee, Ibrahim Azizi, confirmed that the Iranian armed forces, along with popular forces, thwarted a plan to launch a ground attack on Iran before it could be carried out. Azizi explained that the enemies intended to infiltrate and launch attacks from the west of the country. So we're talking about the Iraqi borders. Most likely that's where the major developments happened in the past couple of weeks. The islands of Kharg and Qishm and other areas, but Iranian military units thwarted their ground objectives and nipped their plan in the bud. Azizi asserted that Iran will continue to pursue the United States until its ultimate defeat, warning enemies against repeating any miscalculations or endangering the security of the Iranian people. He stressed that Iran would respond to any threat to the security of its people, saying that any new attempt to undermine Iran's security would jeopardize the security of its enemies around the world. So the ground attempts already happened, and they weren't by the United States and Israel directly, they were through proxy forces. And these proxy forces are most likely the proxy forces in the Iraqi Kurdistan region, where Iran carried out more than 14 operations outside of its territories. Iran now moved to a position where it's carrying out operations outside the country. They're no longer in the same position that they were in before, and they mentioned that several times in the past couple of days. Senior figures in Iran, senior figures in the Iranian military. Iran is developing capabilities to conduct military operations on the enemy territory far from Iran's borders. One of Iran's top generals said. Naqdi, this general here, who actually had an interview, we might share some of it. But that all proves that the situation now is getting closer than ever to a full-blown war between Iran and the United States and Israel as well. As a matter of fact, this was one of the posts about Iran's operation or potential operations should the United States have this attack against them. Iran warns it is preparing for military operations on U.S. soil following a new military doctrine asking RGC to attack enemy on its soil, adding that Iran will take operations into enemy territory, into the enemy's lands, and carry out operations far from our own territory. Mohammad Reza Naqdi, whenever the conditions are favorable and the order is issued, we must be able to make the operation into enemy territory. That is a huge shift coming from Iran. That is a significant shift. And have we seen something along the lines? Yes, we have. So listen, without hard evidence, without confirmation or anything, there have been certain explosions in the United States in certain events, whether it's hacking into critical infrastructure and disabling it, the mysterious fires that broke out in a Texas oil plant during the 40-day war, several things. So let's not underestimate Iran's capability to carry out operations outside the country. They could have certain deployments. They can send drones from a very far territory. Lots of things can happen here. And the United States, of course, wouldn't want to mention anything as such because, well, hey, the American people are now understanding that they started it, as in the American administration started it without the consent or support of the American people. That's why he firstly didn't say it was a war, and then he stopped it for a short period of time. And now they can bypass Congress and anything, by the way, because, you know, there were like these legislations happening and bills and attempts to try and curb Trump's capability to conduct a war. They already said it's not a war. So they'll say, okay, it's just a military engagement. You know, we're just having fun with guns next to Iran. I mean, you know, they'll explain it however they wish. And then PTEX have said as well, oh, there was a ceasefire, so it ended. Therefore, we have a further 60 days because the limit is 60 days. So yeah, we'll start having like playing with guns around the world and then saying, okay, we stopped playing, and murdering children in the process. So they're very serious. And that is clearly the way that they are planning to get out of this situation. More attacks against Iran. And the problem here is more attacks that they wouldn't be able to contain. So let's put everything into perspective. When the United States and Israel attacked Iran during the 40-day war, Trump himself said he was shocked by the Iranian response and by the fact that Iran targeted American bases in so many Gulf states and Arab states that participated in this attack. How many times did he say he was close to a deal? They want to talk, blah, blah. That from day one, he was saying that Iran wants a deal. Iran wasn't talking to them. Iran had a certain plan despite multiple attempts, serious attempts from the United States for Iran to come with a negotiating table. They did not talk to them up until it reached a certain point where Iran felt that they inflicted enough damage for them to be sitting and negotiating with a mediator about a potential de-escalation. So there had to be a response happening before they sat down and came to the MOU that now the United States breached. Likewise, now the United States is trying to talk to Iran. Iran is telling them, go back to the MOU. It's as simple as that. You signed an agreement, go back to it. You don't want to go back to it. The Strait of Hormuz is shut, and there could be a potential of other straits being shut, primarily Bab el-Mandab. But now there are new developments in Bab el-Mandab and in the Red Sea. What are these developments? Saudi Arabia leads a 14-nation naval coalition to counter Houthi blockade. So listen to this. The creation of the coalition was announced in a joint statement by its members and reported by Critical Threats here. New structure includes 14 countries. Who are the 14 countries? Bahrain, Comoros, Djibouti, Egypt, Jordan, Kuwait, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Turkey, and the Saudi-backed Yemeni government. All of these are participants in the coalition. So we're talking about 14 countries. Turkey and Pakistan are members of this defense pact. Many of them are regional countries too. And they joined this coalition. Okay, what are they planning to do exactly? The task force, listen about the details about the task force first. The task force is headquarters in Saudi Arabia. In total, around 50 countries, including the US and EU member states, have been invited to participate. The coalition was established in response to the growing threat to commercial shipping in the Red Sea, according to this report. Houthi activity already reduced vessel traffic in Strait by approximately 20%. Of course, what they're not telling you here is the fact that this is a response from Ansarullah, who are responding to a Saudi blockade against them, an aggression from the Western-backed Saudi establishment and its crimes against Yemen that it has been committing for well over a decade, whether they have a puppet regime or not. But there are more questions happening here. What are the questions? Are there, or are they, this coalition, and that is the most pressing question, doing the dirty work of the United States and Israel in the Red Sea? Or is it going to be limited? Is it going to be symbolic? Are they actually going to attack Ansarullah? Or would their attacks be limited, for example, to small boats or ships if they operate? Because technically, if you really want to stop any threat, well, firstly, the rational thing and the smart thing to do is address the root cause of the problem. And that root cause of the problem is the Saudi aggression against the Yemeni people, no matter how many agents they have there. And if we want to talk about any effective measures, if you don't want to deal with it from the core, just deal with the Saudi aggression and remove their blockade and leave Yemen to be, then you're going to have attacks against the source. And these wouldn't be only attacks in the sea. They would have to be attacks on Yemeni territories. Are they going to attack Yemeni territories and do the US and Israel's dirty work, where the United States and its genocide coalition, primarily the United States and Britain, failed miserably, even after very large-scale attacks inside of Yemen? The Pentagon just confirmed yesterday that they actually killed 165 Yemeni civilians during the strikes that they had in support of Israel, again. Because what was Yemen doing? Ansarullah in particular. They were imposing a perfectly legal blockade against a genocidal country committing war crimes. Something that Europe should have done before then. But in that regard, Yemen's Ansarullah were the only ones implementing international law. They told Israel, stop the genocide, we'll lift the siege. And it was very effective, by the way. Israel's main southern port shut, the only southern port, the only access to the Red Sea. That's it, went bust. The United States could not force Ansarullah to give in. As a matter of fact, they tried. They supported Saudi Arabia as much as they could. Now, nothing worked. Is this coalition going to be there? From my perspective, that's the only question. Because if the answer is yes, then they are doing the dirtiest type of thing that they can ever do, which might lead to more escalation because Iran wouldn't be holding back. And the Yemenis shouldn't be holding back as well. And ask yourself this, when do these countries have coalitions? When? Against who? They have the capacity to form a coalition. Did you form a coalition to stop a genocide? And to stop the child killing in Gaza? Against the country that you are claiming to be the most dangerous country in the region and the most problematic and this and that? You couldn't form a coalition for Gaza, but you can form a coalition for Yemen. You couldn't form a coalition to save lives. You can form a coalition for financial benefits and economic interests. Wow. I mean, that says a lot, doesn't it? It says a lot about every single country that's participating in this coalition. If they do start to take action, by the way, I would not be surprised that there will be literally internal rebellion in these countries. Because the whole world is sick of them. Seeing a genocide in front, live streamed. And look at the map. Look at the size. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan. They don't form a coalition for Gaza, they form a coalition for Yemen. The only country from the Arab Gulf states, or at least part of it, to stand up against Israel and the United States. It says a lot about all of these countries. And again, you know, Let's give things a chance. We're not outright saying that they're going to. The fact that they formed a coalition is shameful enough, okay, for Yemen, and didn't form a coalition to break the siege on Gaza. Do you know what? Not attack Israel. They didn't form a coalition to break the siege and feed the starving children of Gaza. But they form a coalition against Yemen. How shameful. How shameful are you? But let's say it's just a coalition, and don't be too rough and this and that. And it's not there to attack Yemen, but, we'll see. So far, it's not sounding good. Telling you now. And if they end up in that position, expect internal wars. I can tell you from now. Because many large chunks of the population in these countries are raging from their country's inaction, especially concerning Gaza. They're sick of them. But what the governments do is they, give the lip service. Oh, Israel is bad and Netanyahu is like Hitler and they should stop and we will help the Palestinians and we do this and we do that. All talk, no action. They didn't even protect civilian flotillas going to break the siege on Gaza. Can you imagine how shameful they are? The Egyptian authorities were beating up human rights activists from all across the world who are more noble than all of them combined, all of these rulers. They were from like 70 countries, from Europe, from America, from Asia, Africa. One activist and what they do is more than all of these countries combined. They sacrifice with their time and they try and do whatever they can to just do something symbolic. And these countries and nuclear bombs and navy and they couldn't break a siege. But they can go and have a coalition against Yemen. Shame on you. Shame on all of you.
Coffee. Follow me.